Socio/Educator, Brainwave Operation Manual first developed in 1985 as the EPFX. This Educator technology is a biofeedback device that also measures the galvanic skin resistance of the person's forehead. This allows for a soft subtle measurement of the electropotential followed by a safe microcurrent simulant to measure the GSR resistance. This constitutes a cybernetic loop for measuring and then handling the body electric. When we first developed the EEG cybernetic loop treatment in 1996, there was a revolution in medicine to be able to measure a brainwave, and through a self-guided auto-focused process the system can correct oscillation, amplitude, and waveform problems of the brain wave. Thus this allows for a drug-free treatment of brain disorders. Over 35,000 devices sold with no record of any single significant risk. All safety risk analysis show complete safety, and in hundreds of studies this type of stimulus has been shown effective. Understanding brainwaves to expand our consciousness. Bhavika, July 22, 2013. Spirituality 19. The human brain is a complex entity constantly at work, sending electrical signals, communicating, building new neural connections and so on. This electrical activity generated by the brain, also known as brainwaves, reflect our state of mind. Reality is not based on outside influences but is an internal process based on our thoughts, perception, and emotions. If we deepen our understanding of these brainwave frequencies, we can control our reality. There are 5 different kinds of brainwaves: beta, alpha, theta, delta, and gamma. Humans have 5 different types of brainwave that take us to different levels of consciousness. Each occur at a specific frequency or pattern. It is completely a natural biological occurrence in every human being to experience these different states at various times in a day, and generally one state is dominant. Did you know that each brainwave has its own set of characteristics representing a unique state of consciousness? Each brainwave state occur in a specific frequency range measured in cycles per second, hertz. Each type of brainwave played a critical role in our mental development during our childhood. And today, they play an important role in maintaining our health and vitality as adults. Let's take a look at the different brainwave states and the associated benefits and experiences. Beta, 12 to 30 Hz. Beta are the brainwaves of our normal waking consciousness. It is associated with a heightened state of alertness, logical thinking, problem-solving ability, concentration, when the mind is actively engaged in mental activities. Like a person in active conversation, playing sports, or making a presentation would be in a beta state. But higher beta levels also result into stress, anxiety, and restlessness. Most people spend their waking lives in a beta state. No wonder many people experience high stress levels in today's world. At the same time, beta is required for effective functioning in daily life. Brainwave frequency chart showing the different frequencies and its state of mind. Alpha, 8 to 12 Hz. Alpha brainwaves are slower in frequency as compared to beta, which translates to a highly relaxed state of awareness. It is a normal brainwave pattern in people who are naturally relaxed and creative. Like you are daydreaming, or even when one close their eyes and meditate, this frequency enhances your imagination, memory, concentration, creativity, reduces stress so you can focus on learning and performance. Meditation results in increase in alpha waves, therefore many meditation and energy healing techniques utilize an alpha brain wave for relaxation and healing. Even the use of cannabis has been linked to an increase in alpha waves in the brain. Children tend to have much higher levels of alpha brainwaves than adults. Alpha brainwaves are considered the healthiest brainwave range, and 10 Hz has widely been accepted as the safest brainwave frequency to train. Listen to the alpha brainwave music. Theta, 4 to 7 Hz. Theta brainwave occur during deep relaxation and meditation, light sleep or lucid dreaming including the REM dream state. It is the realm of your subconsciousness, where the mind is capable of profound insight, advanced intuition, healing, and oneness. In theta state our minds can connect to the universe and manifest life-enhancing changes. You can also experience vivid visualizations, great inspiration, and profound creativity. The lower the brain frequency, the faster the learning. Meditation or yoga is credited as being so relaxing because they induce the mind in a trance-like state where it starts generating theta waves. People tend to have paranormal, psychic experiences when their brain is full of theta brainwaves. Most children and teenagers have dominant theta brainwave patterns. Listen to some theta meditation music. Delta, 0.5 to 4 Hz, delta waves are the slowest in frequency but are the highest in amplitude. Observed in deep, dreamless sleep, this frequency is the gateway to the universal mind and the collective unconscious, where information received is otherwise unavailable at the conscious level. Delta brainwave states have long been associated with healing, because deep sleep is necessary for regeneration and for your body's self-healing mechanisms. Delta waves in meditation are said to help experienced practitioners access the unconscious mind. It is a dominant brainwave of infants, birth to 24 months, and even adults in deep sleep. Gamma, 25 to 100 Hz, the gamma brainwave is the fastest frequency at which the brain functions, where an individual can experience bursts of insight or high-level information processing. Experiments on Tibetan Buddhist monks have shown a correlation between transcendental mental states and gamma waves. When the monks were asked to generate feelings of compassion, their brain activity went into gamma frequency in a rhythmic, coherent manner. It is the state of being in the zone, the feeling that you can do anything. Altering brainwave states. All of us experience these brainwave frequencies at different times every day, which take us to different levels of consciousness. Like when you are awake, you are in a different brainwave state as compared to when you are sleeping. You can alter your brainwave pattern in order to reach a desired level of consciousness. For example, if you can't get sleep at night when you feel stressed, you can synchronize your brainwave into the frequency that corresponds to sleep using sound. This technique of synchronizing your brainwave frequencies to an external audio stimuli is known as brainwave entrainment. As this process is continued for some time, the brainwave is tuned to the frequency of external sound and thus achieve the particular frequency level of that sound, alpha, theta or delta. But you don't need external stimulus if you can meditate. During meditation you reach a calm and relaxed state. This is the alpha state of consciousness. As the meditation deepens, you find yourself being more calm and focused, and the brainwave level reaches to theta, and finally to delta, state. Binaural beats are a brainwave entrainment audio stimulus that alter your state of consciousness. Ways of brainwave entrainment. Binaural beats. How can a sound with frequency lower than 20 Hz range be audible to the human ear? The answer lies in a specialized sound known as binaural beats. What it did was simple: playing two different frequencies in each ear, the brain detects the difference between the two frequencies and tunes into the third binaural beat. So if you play 400 Hz into the right ear, and 410 Hz into your left ear, using stereo headphones, your brain produces a third binaural beat pulsing at 10 Hz, which is the difference between the two tones. 10 Hz is also equal to the alpha frequency, which brings about light relaxation, meditation, and creative thinking. Binaural beats shall provide you some excellent results, often instantly, which will help you in many ways. Binaural beats. Use headphones while listening. Theta is associated with extreme relaxation, sleep or drowsiness. Generally, one feels a sense of peace and calm when the brain kicks into theta gear. Isochronic tones. Isochronic tones are switched on and off via predictable patterns, creating a pulse effect that is extremely effective when used for therapeutic reasons. Isochronic are even more intense than binaural beats and considered more effective. An isochronic tone is a single tone that turns on and off in a particular pattern. Each of the tones are distinct and are evenly spaced to be able to create a lasting impression on the brain. Basically, our brains have to do much less work to get the same effects as binaural beats, which allows us to feel more relaxed, get in a more powerful and peaceful meditative state, and visualize better. It is recommended to use headphones. Many people who do not respond well to binaural beats often respond very well to isochronic tones. However, for a permanent life-changing spiritual focus, you need to use traditional meditation methods as your primary tools to access higher dimensions. As you know, meditation can also make structural change to the brain in powerful and positive ways and even the people around you. Sources: theta brainwave frequencies. What are gamma brainwaves? How to produce more gamma waves with meditation. Source: overview of the 4 basic brainwaves. Introduction: the brain consists of millions and millions of neurons. These neurons communicated with each other via electrical impulses. Depending on the task one is doing, active thinking, sleeping, dreaming, meditating and so on, not all neurons need to send off these electrical impulses. While there are many neurons sending electrical impulses to one another in a task like reading or calculating, less neurons are active in sleep, for example. This makes sense, since our brain is barely active in the sleeping phases. Some neurons still send off electrical impulses, but these are different in amplitude and frequency to the electrical impulses that involve an active thinking task. When one measures these impulses with an electroencephalogram, EEG, all these impulses result into a wave. These waves originate in the brain and are called brain waves, logically. Let us say, in non-active thinking tasks like sleeping, these brain waves are rather slow and of a low amplitude. In an active thinking task, these brain waves are quite fast and in a higher amplitude. There are many different brain waves. Gamma waves are one of them, and it has to be said that they are even rather special waves. What are gamma waves? Gamma waves are typically of a high frequency and amplitude. Gamma brain waves are one of the fastest waves that reach all parts of the brain. Their frequency is normally 40 Hz and more. It has already been observed that people can produce gamma waves that have an amplitude of 100 Hz. These are called hypergamma brain waves and are a subtype of gamma brain waves. They occur when millions of neurons are active at the same time and fire these electrical impulses simultaneously. Normally, people do not produce these brain waves under normal circumstances. These brain waves were mostly found in geniuses, for example, in a professor of physics. I like to call them the genius brain waves. They were also observed in meditators who were practicing the loving-kindness meditation. As it seems, gamma waves either occur in very intelligent people or in those people who experience unconditional love. It has been observed that Buddhist monks who started to practice the loving-kindness meditation almost immediately at will produced gamma brain waves. So, in essence, gamma brain waves occur when there is an unusually high brain activity. Increasing gamma waves with either binaural beats or specific meditations can lead to a number of marvelous benefits. Afterwards, I will give you some advice on how to increase gamma waves and what to do in order to experience them more often and spontaneously. Source: http://sharasbang2013.files.wordpress.com/2013/02. Gamma waves with crashing waves in the background. Virtual coffee with gamma waves. Benefits of gamma waves: better memory, increased focus on tasks, better learning. Since the brain is so superactive, people are able to learn faster, information is processed at a much higher rate. A high amount of gamma waves works like an antidepressant. Studies have shown that a gamma brainwave therapy was successful against ad bliss. People have feelings of extreme bliss. Compassion: people tend to have a profound compassion towards other people. Enhanced senses: it seems that the senses work better and reality is perceived more vividly. Works like coffee for some people. 3 ways how to increase gamma waves. One way to increase gamma waves is to listen to binaural beats. I recommend you to have a glass of water next to you after you finish your session. Sometimes, it happens that you feel a bit dizzy. Other than in the lower binaural beats, I recommend you to do something that involves active thinking like reading or learning. Normally, one would silent his mind and focus on the binaural beats, like in theta brainwave entrainment for example, but in this case you should be doing something. Another more natural way, in my opinion, is to meditate. Most meditations are good to increase gamma wave activity, but the best meditation for this is the loving kindness meditation. This meditation will not be described in this article, since it would be far too long. If you are interested in learning more about this special meditation, please read the full How to Do the Loving Kindness Meditation article or see the links below. The last way I can give you from personal experience is to recognize their occurrence. Sometimes, especially when you start meditating or listening to binaural beats, you will have sudden feelings of bliss, for example, in your everyday life. This can happen in school, while watching TV, in the gym or anywhere else. Recognize these sudden occurrences and hold on to them, and your brain will automatically learn that you desire these states and that they are good. Consequently, it will happen more often in the future, which will also have positively affect your behavior towards yourself and other people. How long does it take to experience states of bliss? This was a question from a user. There is no definite answer to it, since these phenomena are quite individual. There are many factors that are important, such as meditation, food, physical activity, and so on. Long experienced meditators are very probable to experience these states of bliss during the gamma brainwave entrainment and for the next few hours after they stop listening to gamma binaural beats. People, with no meditation background, do not experience these states of bliss right after the session, but some do. In my case, as an unexperienced meditator, it took me 2 days until I started to experience these feelings of bliss. They occurred quite randomly. It is important that you listen on a daily basis to gamma binaural beats. Personal experience: some time ago, I started listening to gamma binaural beats. It happened that I felt a bit dizzy and had the need to drink something. Normally, I felt better afterwards. Also, after a 15-minute session where I simply focused on the mere binaural beats, I felt overwhelmed. It feels as if my brain is not yet ready to embrace the entirely or to tune in into these frequencies. This didn't happen with other binaural beats, delta, theta, etc. When I was reading a book, for example, Faust, Ulysses, and other complicated books, I was able to focus on the text very good, and my reading speed even increased slightly, while listening to gamma binaural beats. Another phenomenon I was able to observe on myself was that I was able to stay awake the whole night without any coffee or black tea or whatsoever. Moreover, I was more awake and more focused on learning material than with caffeine in my blood. I still recommend you to go to bed than staying awake all nights, though. Ever since I started recognizing these sudden feelings of bliss, it started to occur more often, and as I realized, I am a happier person in general. Really good to know what gamma waves and some further tips can do to change your life to the better. Gamma brain waves from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, not to be confused with gamma rays. Gamma waves. A gamma wave is a pattern of neural oscillation in humans with a frequency between 25 and 100 Hz. Though 40 Hz is typical too, according to a popular theory, gamma waves may be implicated in creating the unity of conscious perception, the binding problem. 345 However, there is no agreement on the theory, as a researcher suggests. Whether or not gamma wave activity is related to subjective awareness is a very difficult question which cannot be answered with certainty at the present time. 6. History: gamma waves were initially ignored before the development of digital electroencephalography, as analog electroencephalography is restricted to recording and measuring rhythms that are usually less than 25 Hz. One of the earliest reports on them was in 1964, using recordings of the electrical activity of electrodes implanted in the visual cortex of awake monkeys. 7. Linked to unity of consciousness. History of idea: the idea that distinct regions in the brain were being stimulated simultaneously was suggested by the finding in 1988 that two neurons oscillate synchronously, though they are not directly connected, when a single external object stimulates their respective receptive fields. Subsequent experiments by many others demonstrated this phenomenon in a wide range of visual cognition. In particular, Francis Crick and Christoph Koch in 1998 argued that there is a significant relation between the binding problem and the problem of visual consciousness, and, as a result, that synchronous 40 Hz oscillations may be causally implicated in visual awareness as well as in visual binding. Later, the same authors expressed skepticism over the idea that 40 Hz oscillations are a sufficient condition for visual awareness. 9. A lead article by Andreas K. Engel et al. In the journal Consciousness and Cognition, 1999, that argues for temporal synchrony as the basis for consciousness, defines the gamma wave hypothesis thus. 10. The hypothesis is that synchronization of neuronal discharges can serve for the integration of distributed neurons into cell assemblies, and that this process may underlie the selection of perceptually and behaviorally relevant information. Role in attentive focus. The suggested mechanism is that gamma waves relate to neural consciousness via the mechanism for conscious attention. The proposed answer lies in a wave that, originating in the thalamus, sweeps the brain from front to back, 40 times per second, drawing different neuronal circuits into sync with the percept, and thereby bringing the percept into the attentional foreground. If the thalamus is damaged even a little bit, this wave stops, conscious awarenesses do not form, and the patient slips into profound coma. For thus the claim is that when all these neuronal clusters oscillate together during these transient periods of synchronized firing, they help bring up memories and associations from the visual percept to other notions. This brings a distributed matrix of cognitive processes together to generate a coherent, concerted cognitive act, such as perception. This has led to theories that gamma waves are associated with solving the binding problem. 3. Gamma waves are observed as neural synchrony from visual cues in both conscious and subliminal stimuli. 11. This research also sheds light on how neural synchrony may explain stochastic resonance in the nervous system. 12. They are also implicated in REM sleep, which involves visualizations, and also during anesthesia. 6. Contemporary research. A 2009 study published in Nature successfully induced gamma waves in mice brains. Researchers performed this study using optogenetics, the method of combining genetic engineering with light to manipulate the activity of individual nerve cells. The protein channel rhodopsin 2, CHR2, which sensitizes cells to light, was genetically engineered into these mice, specifically to be expressed in a target group of interneurons. These fast-spiking, FS, interneurons, known for high electrical activity, were then activated with an optical fiber and laser, the second step in optogenetics. In this way, the cell activity of these interneurons was manipulated in the frequency range of 8 to 200 Hz. The study produced empirical evidence of gamma wave induction in the approximate interval of 25 to 100 Hz. The gamma waves were most apparent at a frequency of 40 Hz. This indicates that the gamma waves evoked by FS manipulation are a resonating brain circuit property. This is the first study in which it has been shown that a brain state can be induced through the activation of a specific group of cells. 13. Relation to meditation. Experiments on Tibetan Buddhist monks have shown a correlation between transcendental mental states and gamma waves. 14. 15. A suggested explanation is based on the fact that the gamma is intrinsically localized. Neuroscientist Sean O'Neilan suggests that this very existence of synchronized gamma indicates that something akin to a singularity, or, to be more prosaic, a conscious experience, is occurring. 14. This work adduces experimental and simulated data to show that what meditation masters have in common is the ability to put the brain into a state in which it is maximally sensitive. As hinted above, gamma waves have been observed in Tibetan Buddhist monks. A 2004 study took 8 long-term Tibetan Buddhist practitioners of meditation and, using electrodes, monitored the patterns of electrical activity produced by their brains as they meditated. The researchers compared the brain activity of the monks to a group of novice meditators. The study had these subjects meditate an hour a day for 1 week prior to empirical observation. In a normal meditative state, both groups were shown to have similar brain activity. However, when the monks were told to generate an objective feeling of compassion during meditation, their brain activity began to fire in a rhythmic, coherent manner, suggesting neuronal structures were firing in harmony. This was observed at a frequency of 25 to 40 Hz, the rhythm of gamma waves. These gamma band oscillations in the monk's brain signals were the largest seen in humans, apart from those in states such as seizures. Conversely, these gamma band oscillations were scant in novice meditators. Though, a number of rhythmic signals did appear to strengthen in beginner meditators with further experience in the exercise. implying that the aptitude for one to produce gamma band rhythm is trainable. 16 Such evidence and research in gamma band oscillations may explain the heightened sense of consciousness, bliss, and intellectual acuity subsequent to meditation. Notably, meditation is known to have a number of health benefits: stress reduction, mood elevation, and increased life expectancy of the mind and its cognitive functions. The current Dalai Lama meditates for 4 hours each morning, and he says that it is hard work. He elaborates that if neuroscience can construct a way in which he can reap the psychological and biological rewards of meditation without going through the practice each morning, he would be apt to adopt the innovation. 17 The aforementioned study in which gamma states were induced in mice may be a step in this direction. Opposing evidence: Many neuroscientists are not convinced of the gamma wave argument. Arguments against it range from the possibility of mismeasurement. It has been suggested that EEG measured gamma waves could be in many cases an artifact of electromyographic activity. 1819, to relations to other neural function, such as minute eye movements. 20 However, proponents like O'Neilan and Andreas Engel argue that gamma evidence persists even with careful signal separation. 1421 Moreover, recent studies using magnetoencephalography, MEG, which does not suffer the potential artifacts associated with EEG, have identified gamma activity associated with sensory processing, mainly in the visual cortex. 22 23 24 25 Bearing this theory in mind, a number of questions remain unexplained regarding details of exactly how the temporal synchrony results in a conscious awareness, or how a new percept calls for the synchrony, etc. See also brain waves. Edit delta wave, 0.1 to 3 Hz, theta wave, 4 to 7 Hz, alpha wave, 8 to 15 Hz, mu wave, 7.5 to 12.5 Hz, SMR wave, 12.5 to 15.5 Hz, beta wave, 16 to 31 Hz, gamma wave, 32 to 100 Hz. References 1. A.B. Hughes Jr., July 2008. Gamma, fast, and ultrafast waves of the brain, their relationships with epilepsy and behavior. Epilepsy Behave 13, 12531 doi 10.1016/j.yeba.2008.01.011.PMID 184398878. 2 A.B. Ian Gold, 1999. Does 40 Hz oscillation play a role in visual consciousness? Consciousness and Cognition 8, 2186195.doi 10.1006/cog.1999.0399. PMID 104480001. 3 A.B. Busaki, Gyurji, 2006. Cycle 9, The Gamma Buzz. Rhythms of the Brain. Oxford. 4 A.B. C. Robert Pollack, The Missing Moment, 1999. 5. W. Singer and C. M. Gray, Visual Feature Integration and the Temporal Correlation Hypothesis. N.U. Reverend Neurosci. 18, 1995, pages 555 to 586. 6. A.B. Vanderwolf Ch., February 2000. Are neocortical gamma waves related to consciousness? Brain Res 855, 2217, 24. Doi 10.1016/S0006-8993, 99, 023513. PMID 106775993. 7 Hughes Jr., 1964. Responses from the visual cortex of unanesthetized monkeys. Pages 99-153. In, Pfeiffer C.C., Smithies Jr., eds, International Review of Neurobiology Volume 7, Academic Press, New York OCLC 439866468. Crick, F., and Kook, C., 1990b. Towards a Neurobiological Theory of Consciousness. Seminars in the Neurosciences v.2, 263 to 275. 9 Crick, F., Kook, C., 2003. Framework for Consciousness. Nature Neuroscience 6, 2. 10 Andreas K. Engel, Pascal Fries, Peter Koenig, Michael Brecht, Wolf Singer, 1999. Temporal Binding, Binocular Rivalry, and Consciousness. Consciousness and Cognition 8, 2. 11 Meloni L., Molina C., Pina M., Torres D., Singer W., Rodriguez E., March 2007. Synchronization of neural activity across cortical areas correlates with conscious perception. J. Neurosci 27, 11/28/58, 65.doi 10.1523/J Neurosci.4623006.2007. PMID 173609007. 12 Ward LM, Dusberg SM, Kitajo K, McLean SE, Rogvinab, December 2006. Neural synchrony in stochastic resonance, attention, and consciousness. Can JEXP Psychol 60, 4319, 26.doi 10.1037/Kiep20060029. PMID 172858879. 13 J. Carden, M. Carl, K. Melodies, U. Noblich, F. Zhang, K. Diasurath, 2009, Driving fast spiking cells induces gamma rhythm and controls sensory responses. Nature, 459, 663666814. ABC Onulan, Sean. Zero Power and Selflessness, What Meditation and Conscious Perception Have in Common. Retrieved May 30, 2009. Journal, Cognitive Sciences 4, 2. 15 Kaufman, Mark, January 3, 2005. Meditation gives brain a charge, study finds. The Washington Post. Retrieved May 3, 2010. 16 Lutz A, Gries Char LL, Rawlings NB, Ricard M, Davidson RJ, 2004. Long-term meditators self-induce high-amplitude gamma synchrony during mental practice. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences USA 101, 16369 to 16373. 17 Scientific American Meditation on Demand. 18 Whittam M, Pope KJ, Fitzgibbon SPETAL, August 2007. Scalp electrical recording during paralysis, quantitative evidence that EEG frequencies above 20 Hz are contaminated by EMG. Clin Neurophysiol 118, 8/1877/88 doi 10.1016/J.Clin.2007.04.027.PMID 175749112. 19 Whittam M, Lewis T, Pope KJETAL, May 2008. Thinking activates EMG in scalp electrical recordings. Clin Neurophysiol 119, 5/116675 doi 10.1016/J.Clin.2008.01.024.PMID 183299554. 20 Yuval Greenberg S, Tomer O, Karen S, Necken I, Dioel Lee, May 2008. Transient induced gamma band response in EEG as a manifestation of miniature SACC aids. Neuron 58, 3429, 41.doi 10.1016/J.Neuron.2008.03.027. PMID 184666752. 21 Dynamic Predictions, Oscillations and Synchrony in Top-Down Processing, A.K. Engel, P. Fries, W. Singer, Nature Reviews Neuroscience, 2001 22. Ajamian P., Holiday I.E., Barnes G.R., Hillebrand A., Hahapapas A., and Singh K.D. 2004, Induced Stimulus-Dependent Gamma Oscillations in Visual Stress. European Journal of Neuroscience, 20, 587-592. 23 Hahapapas A., Ajamian P., Swetnam J.B., Holiday I.E., Barnes Gr., 2007. Stimuli of varying spatial scale induce gamma activity with distinct temporal characteristics in human visual cortex. Neuroimage 35, 518-30. 24-carat methylcumarase WAMI SD, SYNC-KD, 2008. Spatiotemporal frequency tuning of bold and gamma band MEG responses compared in primary visual cortex. Neuroimage 40, 1552-1560. 25-carat swetinum JB, methylcumarase WAMI SD, SYNC-KD, 2009. Spectral properties of induced and evoked gamma oscillations in human early visual cortex to moving and stationary stimuli. Journal of Neurophysiology 102, 1241-1253. Educator/Socio electroencephalogram detection and correction. The EEG is generated from the inhibitory and excitatory postsynaptic potentials of the cortical nerves. These postsynaptic potentials come together in the cortex and extend through the skull and scalp. Neuronal action potentials have much smaller and shorter potentials, 1 milsec. Postsynaptic potentials acting at 15 to over 200 milsec. The rhythmical activity of the EEG is a function of the postsynaptic cortical neuronal potentials, which are synchronized by the complex interactions of vast quantities of cortical cells. The cortical neurons interact with the subcortical pacemakers. Together there is a synchronicity that results from this interaction. Subcortical structures can send synchronizing impulses to cortical neurons and induce widespread synchronous rhythm changes. The system must filter EKG activity, external pulses, eye movements, and other artifacts. The summation of electrical potential changes in the cortex is primarily at the vertically oriented large pyramidal cells of the cortex. The polarization and depolarization of the cells creates electropotentials of 100 microvolts or more. The EEG is far too complex to judge individual neuronal activity, but it can be useful in revealing inappropriate rhythms. The alpha and mu waves help to impose a regularity on the overall functions. The recruiting response originating in the medial and intralaminar thalamus. The augmenting response from nuclei of the lateral thalamus helps to stabilize sensory information. Sleep, relaxation, and thought patterns have been studied to give estimates of functions of the brain wave. Reticular formation, midbrain, limbic system, and other areas of the brain have effects on the EEG. The most exact EEG comes the multiple pole, 12-24 or 36, electrodes. The QXCI uses an eighth pole placed on the forehead. This is for convenience, not accuracy. So the results of the test are not for ultimate diagnosis. The system is at best 85% accurate and thus can be used as a pre-test before other testing. Factors can be analyzed such as waveform, repetition, frequency, amplitude, distribution, phase relationships, timing, persistence, and of reactance. The major waveforms are then presented in percent on the left in a group box. The largest should be beta in a normal waking patient. Alpha indicates relaxation, theta consciousness, delta sleep. If you check an area, with the checkbox in front of the word, the computer will help to correct any imbalance and attempt to increase the consciousness waveform in the patient. On the right side there is a grid of wave and frequency disorders that the computer can detect. In so doing, the computer here does not calculate in percent as in the waveform on the left. As the computer generates numbers ranking the arbitrary amount of the wave type it finds. Normal wave should be the highest, normally over 40. No other number should be within 10 points of normal. If any are within 10 points of normal or if any are greater than the normal score, then the computer has estimated that this area of disturbance is pathologic. To treat any such dysfunction, click in the checkbox in front of the name of the disorder. Then the computer will attempt to treat this area of dysfunction with harmonic bioresonance. Epileptic ictal patterns, hyperarrhythmia, slow spike, multifocal independent spikes, epileptic spindles all are detectable. These can occur in infants sometimes without any risk. Past 8 years these patterns can be evidence of brain hormone deficiency, injury, or other blockage of hormonal activity. Local slow waves are less than 8 Hz and appear at only one electrode. Local slow waves come from a structural lesion, ischemia, epileptic tendencies, serotonin deficiencies, tumor, hemorrhages, abscesses, migraines, hypertension, or other amplitude disorders. Here the overall battery of the brain is weak. This can be because of mineral dehydration, amino acid deficiency, fatty acid deficiency, or hypooxygenation. This can occur in brain death, stroke, Huntington's chorea, brain toxicity, or metabolic disease. Anxiety or intense fear can also produce such a pattern. Cerebellar disorders. Here there is a polyspike wave set at 4 to 6 Hz with anterior maximum. This can be from demyelination of the cerebellar area. There may be accompanying dizziness and inability to maintain balance. Treatment should include fatty acids and proper sarcodes. General asymmetry. Here there is a difference in the amplitude and or phase of the waves from the two sides of the head. Thalamic cortical lesions can cause or lesions on one side. A skull defect can cause this pattern. Suggest cranial sacral therapy or other cranial adjustment. Injury. Many traumas, physical or emotional, can produce certain wave forms. These forms are over-synchronous for a period, then non-synchronous for a period. There will occur an abnormal alpha wave that prevents total relaxation. This indicates the need for the injury homeopathic or other therapy for trauma. Bilateral sync. Here slow waves, 7 to 8 Hz, are found on both sides of the head with exactly the same occurrence. The pattern can shift location and can be detected as trains of waves on a background of lower amplitude. They can be created by hyperventilation, drowsiness, hypoglycemia, having a disorder more in the gray matter than the white matter, structural disorders in the mesencephalon, diencephalon, or the frontal lobe. Also treat toxins, endocrine and metabolic disease. 0 Deep brain asymmetry. Many conditions can affect the deep parts of the brain. Limbic, thalamic, rhinencephalon, and other areas can produce certain wave deformities that will echo on each channel and even affect the total trivector analysis. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Addison's, Wilson's. Other metabolic diseases can produce this pattern. Toxins such as steroids, or drugs can also do the same. Personality disorders. The personality engram has a signature reactive field. If there are two engrams appearing, this factor can appear. There are other waveforms which can be detected from the QXCI. These factors will need to be treated with counseling and or NLP techniques. There is extreme evidence and an ever-growing stream of research showing how we can use electrical readings to understand the body and then use soft, safe electrical stimulation to treat and correct functions. And this is what we at Socio/Educator Technology have been doing for over 30 years. Electrocardiograph 3-pole EKG is done extensively as a pre-screen of cardiac function. Although it not as accurate as an 8 or 12-pole test, there is still some factors that a 3-pole test can suppose. To learn more about cardiology, we recommend the natural medicine book Cardiology of Natural Medicine by Dr. Nelson. There are disorders of rhythm sometimes caused by mineral imbalance. There are disorders of conduction sometimes caused by excess fat, lack of exercise or diet. The QXCI can detect these irregularities of heart rhythm. They will be displayed on the screen. Educator third-party billing functions do the SOC index and calibration, then do go to the EEG/ECG graph, hit start, wait till you get a good pre-test screenshot, hit stop, exit, do the test, do all therapies, and then the EEG/ECG panel access post-test EEG/ECG. After all Educator functions are over, do the post-test EEG/ECG screenshot, go to the super bill page for insurance billing. Your insurance bill patient record package should include the following: 1. SOC index review and suggestions. 2. EEG/ECG pre and post readings. 3. Doctor referral and or prescription. 4. Wellness QRB contract. 5. Super bill with ICD hashtag and CPT hashtag. 6. Comments: EEG biofeedback in the treatment of attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. Alternative medicine review, June 2007 by Patrick and Friel. Abstract electroencephalogram, EEG, biofeedback, also known as neurofeedback, is a promising alternative treatment for patients with attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, AD/HD. EEG biofeedback therapy rewards scalp EEG frequencies that are associated with relaxed attention, and suppresses frequencies associated with under or overarousal. In large-scale clinical trials, the efficacy of EEG biofeedback for AD/HD is comparable to that of stimulant medications. Many different EEG biofeedback protocols for AD/HD are available. Single-channel protocols developed by Liber and interhemispheric protocols developed by the Othmers are widely practiced and supported by large-scale clinical studies. AlternMed Rev 2007, 12, 2146-151, most recent healthcare articles. Gadget Lust, Optoma Pico PK101 Pocket Projector. More good news at Aetna, is it embracing its own transformation? Cigna University offers an easy A-course load. For cost shifting to consumers. Healthcare Roundup, Express Scripts. Extortion Redux, WellCare Bags, more introduction. Attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, AD/HD, affects approximately 3 to 5% of school-age children in the United States, and a majority of children diagnosed with AD/HD are treated with medications, primarily stimulants. 1. It is estimated that 10% of 10-year-old boys in the United States are currently being treated with prescription stimulants. 2. Concerns about the cardiovascular toxicity of amphetamine and methylphenidate, 2, cause many patients and their families to seek alternative therapies. Well-established alternative therapies include dietary modifications and the administration of supplements, including vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, amino acids, essential fatty acids, phospholipids, and probiotics. 3. Another alternative to drug therapy for AD/HD is electroencephalogram, EEG, biofeedback, also known as neurofeedback, which is supported by extensive peer-reviewed literature, including large-scale controlled clinical trials. 1,4. The purpose of this review is to summarize the evidence supporting the use of EEG biofeedback for treatment of AD/HD. Background. The standard scalp EEG is recorded at 19 sites. Scalp EEG frequencies are broadly associated with various mental states, as shown in Table 1. With modern computerized systems, experts can map scalp EEG quantitatively by using spectral analysis. Quantitative electroencephalography, QEEG, studies demonstrate deviations from normal patterns in many neuropsychiatric conditions, including AD/HD. 5. Clinical EEG biofeedback originated with the observation by Sterman that cats conditioned to produce a specific EEG frequency, SMR, sensory motor rhythm, 12 to 15 Hz, exhibited an elevated seizure threshold when exposed to the convulsant agent methylhydrazine. 6. Subsequent studies by Sterman and others, conducted from the 1970s onward, demonstrated that approximately 80% of patients with medically intractable epilepsy experience a clinically significant, 50%, reduction in seizure frequency after a course of EEG biofeedback that rewards the SMR frequency. 7. Patients with AD/HD exhibit characteristic surface EEG disturbances. 4. Specifically, 85 to 90% of patients with AD/HD display signs of cortical hypoarousal, quantitatively described as elevated relative theta power, reduced relative alpha and beta power, and elevated theta/alpha and theta/beta power ratios, Table 1. These patterns are typically observed over frontal and central midline brain regions. A smaller subgroup of AD/HD patients exhibits an EEG pattern suggestive of hyperarousal, with greater relative beta activity, decreased relative alpha activity, and decreased theta/beta power ratios diffusely across multiple cortical recording sites. The hyperaroused group tends to respond poorly to stimulant medications. Liber et al. Developed EEG biofeedback protocols to inhibit cortical slowing and reward higher frequencies in hypoaroused patients, with the goal of normalizing EEG activity in regions thought to be responsible for attention and behavioral control. 4. Modern EEG biofeedback systems, sold by a number of manufacturers, consist of a set of EEG sensors and a signal transducer/amplifier, connected to a computer or computers with software capable of analyzing the EEG signals, performing various transformations, displaying relevant signals to the patient, and providing rewards or inhibitions in the form of visual and/or audio feedback. The client learns to enhance desirable EEG frequencies and suppress undesirable frequencies at the selected scalp location, by being rewarded, example by progress in a video game, for increasing desirable frequencies and/or reducing undesirable frequencies. Scalp electrode placements along the sensory motor strip, C3 and C4, and temporal lobes, T3 and T4, are widely used. A typical neurofeedback configuration involves the patient seated in a reclining chair, watching one video display that provides video and audio feedback, while the therapist monitors a second video display that provides detailed, real-time data on the patient's EEG during the session. A typical course of EEG biofeedback therapy involves at least 20 half-hour sessions, administered over a 6 to 12-week period. Although rates of progress vary from patient to patient, significant benefit is often observed within the first few weeks of therapy. Accreditation for EEG biofeedback practitioners is available through the Biofeedback Certification Institute of America. The effects of stimulant therapy, EEG biofeedback, and parenting style on the primary symptoms of attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. Manastra VJ, Manastra DM, George SFPI Attention Disorders Clinic, 2102 East Main Street, Endicott, New York, 13760 USA. PopIdoc@AOL.com. 100 children, ages 6 to 19, who were diagnosed with attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, either inattentive or combined types, participated in a study examining the effects of Ritalin, EEG biofeedback, and parenting style on the primary symptoms of ADHD. All of the patients participated in a 1-year, multimodal, outpatient program that included Ritalin, parent counseling, and academic support at school, either a 504 plan or an IEP. 51 of the participants also received EEG biofeedback therapy. Post-treatment assessments were conducted both with and without stimulant therapy. Significant improvement was noted on the test of variables of attention, TOVA, L. M. Greenberg, 1996, and the Attention Deficit Disorders Evaluation Scale, ADS, S. B. McCarney, 1995, when participants were tested while using Ritalin. However, only those who had received EEG biofeedback sustained these gains when tested without Ritalin. The results of a quantitative electroencephalographic scanning process, QEEG scan, VJ Manastra ETAL, 1999, revealed significant reduction in cortical slowing only in patients who had received EEG biofeedback. Behavioral measures indicated that parenting style exerted a significant moderating effect on the expression of behavioral symptoms at home but not at school. EEG biofeedback, a generalized approach to neuroregulation. Siegfried Othmer, Susan F. Othmer, and David A. Kaiser. Publication date, Epilepsy. Epilepsy is listed among the most difficult conditions to address with EEG training because of the variety with which epilepsy manifests, because of the ongoing structural deficits which may underlie the condition, and also because historically it has been the most intractable cases which have been referred for EEG training. This historical circumstance introduces a bias into how matters are viewed, since in fact there are many types of seizure that respond quite readily to EEG training. Since training was done at the sensoromotor strip, and was deemed to address the motor system specifically, Sterman argued initially that the training could be expected to be beneficial only for seizures with a predominantly motor symptomatology. Subsequently, however, a controlled study was successfully accomplished with primarily temporal lobe or complex partial seizures, Lanz, 1988. The Sterman protocol was replicated for seizures in a number of laboratories and by a number of groups, see references for Table 1. The technique failed to be acknowledged at the time, however, because of confounding issues regarding anticipated changes in the EEG, Qui, 1979. The CAT EEG had manifested a countable increase in incidence of bursts of SMR rhythmic activity with training. The human EEG does not exhibit such bursts except during stage 2 sleep. And whereas there was in fact an increase in sleep spindles with training in epileptic subjects, the various studies which were intended to replicate Sterman's findings did not yield consistent EEG changes in the waking state. Kaplan, 1975. We now understand that this is not a contradiction. The human EEG remains more desynchronized in the waking state than the CAT EEG, and observable bursts would now be considered anomalous. Some individuals did in fact show increased amplitudes of the EEG in the SMR subsequent to long-term reinforcement, others tended toward normalization of their EEG characteristics, which in many instances meant an overall decrease in EEG amplitudes, even within the training band. At the relevant time, however, during the 1970s and 1980s, the lack of consistent EEG changes accompanying the training was thought to be fatal to the hypothesis that EEG training had taken place. The behavioral benefit of EEG biofeedback training that had been replicated in all of the studies was therefore attributed instead to nonspecific factors. Subsequent developments, in our clinical setting, extended the seizure work to absence seizures as well. These generally require higher frequency training of 15 to 18 Hz in addition to the SMR training. It is important to make the distinction that in the use of EEG training with seizures, no claim is made that the seizure focus is in any sense extinguished or annihilated. Rather, it is claimed that by enhancing stability conditions in the surrounding healthy brain tissue, the irritable focus will no longer as readily lead to spreading of paroxysmal activity and hence to focal or generalized seizures. The effect of enhancing stability can often be additive to the effect of anticonvulsant medication. It may also lead to the reduction or even elimination of such medication. More than half of seizures occur at night, and most of these are closely associated with sleep transitions, particularly with falling asleep and waking. This association suggests an intimate connection of seizure susceptibility with stability of arousal. Similarly, about half of all seizures are associated with identifiable events of brain trauma. This of course suggests a connection between the seizure susceptibility with the specific organic loss suffered in the brain injury. However, an equally compelling case can be made that the association is in fact with arousal dysregulation here as well. As already indicated in our discussion of brain injury, the predominant symptomatology associated with such injury relates not to the specific location of injury, but to generalized function, in particular the management of arousal. Hence, a brain with an intrinsic seizure vulnerability could simply have been pushed over the edge by a minor head injury. The hypothesis that efficacy for epilepsy is traceable in large measure to improved regulation of arousal comes from an unusual quarter. A Swedish study has demonstrated some 60% seizure reduction in children by behavioral methods alone, Dahl, 1992. The strategies typically involve deliberate changes in arousal level when the subject anticipates a seizure. As it happens, the 60% reduction is also the average seizure reduction obtained using the Sterman protocol in the various published studies. The nexus with arousal dysfunction helps us to address the structuralist objection that the seizure focus should be impervious to such an intervention as EEG biofeedback. Whether articulated or not, it is this structuralist objection that has resulted in neurologists dismissing this technique out of hand for 30 years. It is in fact quite sufficient to argue that only healthy brain tissue is affected by the training in order to explain the clinical findings. Excerpt from Applied Neurophysiology and Brain Biofeedback edited by Rob Call, Joe Kamiya and Gary Schwartz. EEG Biofeedback for Addictive Disorders, The State of the Art in 2004. Author, Trudeau, David. 1 Source, Journal of Adult Development, Volume 12, Numbers 2-3, August 2005, pages 139-146. 8. This paper reviews studies of brainwave biofeedback as a therapeutic technique for substance use disorder. This modality is attractive as a medication-free, neurophysiologic, and self-actualizing treatment for a substance-based, brain-impaired and self-defeating disorder. 3 approaches are described and the literature for each reviewed. Alpha, theta occipital feedback was originally employed to facilitate autosuggestion in hypnagogic states to augment standard therapy approaches in substance abuse treatment programs and appears most suited for chronic treatment-resistant alcoholics. Beta augmentation feedback in conjunction with alpha/theta feedback has been employed in mixed substance abuse and stimulant abuse with good results. Individualized brainwave biofeedback based on correcting EEG abnormalities, or based on addressing comorbid conditions is a third approach that has been described, and may be most appropriate where confounding comorbid conditions are present. Although effectiveness in certain hard-to-treat populations, conventional treatment-resistant alcoholics, crack cocaine addicts, cognitively impaired substance abusers, is promising, better designed controlled studies are needed. Keywords: addictions, EEG, neurotherapy, biofeedback, alcohol abuse, stimulant abuse. Document type: research article. A controlled study of the effectiveness of EEG biofeedback training on children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Journal of Hwazhong University of Science and Technology. Medical Sciences Publisher: Hwazhong University of Science and Technology. ISSN 1672-20733, print, 1993-1352, online, issue volume 25, number 3/June, 2005, doi 10.1007/. BF 02828171, pages 368-370. Subject: Collection Medicine Springer. Link date Tuesday, March 11, 2008. Add to marked items, add to shopping cart, add to saved items. Permissions and reprints. Recommend this article PDF, 280.6 KB, free preview. Xiangzongui 1, Shixuhua 2, and Su Hiking 1, 1, Department of Child Health, Hubei Maternal and Child Hospital, 430,070 Wuhan, China, 2, Department of Maternal and Child Health, School of Public Health, Tongji Medical College, Hwazhong University of Science and Technology, 430,030 Wuhan, China. Received, February 17, 2005. Summary: in order to study the treatment of the children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, the Integrated Visual and Auditory Continuous Performance Test, EVA-CPT, was clinically applied to evaluate the effectiveness of electroencephalogram, EEG, biofeedback training. Of all the 60 children with ADHD aged more than 6 years, the effective rate of EEG biofeedback training was 91.6% after 40 sessions of EEG biofeedback training. Before and after treatment by EEG biofeedback training, the overall indexes of EVA were significantly improved among predominantly inattentive, hyperactive, and combined subtype of children with ADHD, p0.001. It was suggested that EEG biofeedback training was an effective and vital treatment on children with ADHD. Keywords: children, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, EEG biofeedback training, effectiveness. Xiangzongui, male, born in 1965, associate professor, EEG biofeedback or neurofeedback, NFB, also called neurotherapy, neurobiofeedback or EEG biofeedback, EGV, is a therapy technique that presents the user with real-time feedback on brainwave activity, as measured by sensors on the scalp, typically in the form of a video display, sound, or vibration. The aim is to provide real-time information to the central nervous system, CNS, as to its current activity. The CNS has two parts, PNs and ANS. Those approaches also believe that neurofeedback training can be understood as being based on a form of operant and/or classical conditioning. In that frame of reference, when brain activity changes in the direction desired by the trainer directing the training, a positive reward feedback is given to the individual, and if the change is in the opposite direct from what was intended, then either different feedback is given or the provision of otherwise attained positive feedback is inhibited, or blocked. These ideas can be applied in various combinations depending on the protocol decided upon by the trainer. Rewards/reinforcements can be as simple as a change in pitch of a tone or as complex as a certain type of movement of a character in a video game. This experience could be called operant conditioning for internal states, even though no research has yet demonstrated that clear operant response curves occur under those scenarios. Nonetheless, a number of different brainwave goals have been proposed by different researchers in the field following on these general ideas. Usually, these goals are based upon extrapolations from research describing abnormal EEG patterns or on results from a quantitative EEG, QEEG, also known as brain mapping, upon the particular client being offered neurofeedback training. A popular goal is the increase of activity in the 12 to 18 Hz band, mu rhythm/sensoromotor rhythm, SMR, and a decrease in the 4 to 8 Hz and or 22 to 28 Hz bands, theta and or beta. The most common and well-documented use of neurofeedback is in the treatment of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Multiple studies have shown neurofeedback to be useful in the treatment of ADHD. 1, Butnick 2005, Master Pasquale et al. 2003. QEEG has been ambivalent, with some studies showing that some forms of ADHD can be characterized by an abundance of slow brainwaves and a diminished quantity of fast wave activity. Butnick 2005, however, alternative patterns have also been described, making the overall picture inconclusive at this time. Some approaches believe that neurofeedback training is best done when it seeks to teach individuals to produce more normalized EEG patterns that optimize their functioning. Citation needed. Some ADHD researchers are unconvinced by these studies, including the psychiatry professor and author of several books on ADHD, Russell Barkley. Barkley opines that neurotherapy's effectiveness in treating ADHD can be ascribed to either uncontrolled case studies or the placebo effect too. In return, neurofeedback advocates note that Barkley has received research funds and personal remuneration from drug giant Eli Lilly and Company and other drug companies. 345. Other areas where neurofeedback has been researched include treatment of substance abuse, anxiety, depression, epilepsy, OCD, learning disabilities, bipolar disorder, conduct disorder, anger and rage, cognitive impairment, migraines, headaches, chronic pain, autism spectrum disorders, sleep dysregulation, PTSD and MTBI. Other approaches to understanding and providing neurofeedback training use nonlinear dynamical control processes and joint time frequency analyses to characterize the ongoing dynamics of EEG during the training process itself. These approaches understand the functioning of the CNS in a more integrated or comprehensive fashion, including the structural ideas of the Russian neuropsychologist Luria and neuropsychiatrist Karl Pribram. Related technologies include hemoencephalography biofeedback, HEG. History and application. In 1924, the German psychiatrist Hans Berger connected a couple of electrodes, small round discs of metal, to a patient's scalp and detected a small current by using a ballistic galvanometer. During the years 1929 to 1938 he published 14 reports about his studies of EEGs, and much of our modern knowledge of the subject, especially in the middle frequencies, is due to his research. Kaiser 2005. Berger analyzed EEGs qualitatively, but in 1932 G. Deitch applied Fourier analysis to 7 records of EEG and became the first researcher of what later is called QEEG, quantitative EEG. Kaiser 2005. Later, Joe Kamiya popularized neurofeedback in the 1960s when an article 1 about the alpha brainwave experiments he had been conducting was published in Psychology Today in 1968. Kamiya's experiment had 2 parts. In the first part, a subject was asked to keep his eyes closed and when a tone sounded to say whether he thought he was in alpha. He was then told whether he was correct or wrong. Initially the subject would get about 50% correct, but some subjects would eventually develop the ability to distinguish between states and be correct a highly significant percentage of the time. In the second part of the study, subjects were asked to go into alpha when a bell rang once and not go into the state when the bell rang twice. Once again some subjects were able to enter the state on command. Others, however, could not control it at all. Nevertheless, the results were significant and very attractive. Alpha states were connected with relaxation, and alpha training had the possibility to alleviate stress and stress-related conditions. Neurofeedback appealed greatly to the social movements of the 1960s as well, when altered states were a lifestyle. For example, in 1973 Elmer Green took a portable psychophysiological lab to India to study Eastern holy men, all of whom possessed the incredible ability to control their heart rate, blood flow, and other autonomic functions, all of whom generated alpha waves continuously while doing so, according to Green's EEG citation needed. Despite these highly dramatic and compelling claims, the universal correlation of high alpha density to a subjective experience of calm cannot be assumed. Visuomotor activity seems to be of primary importance in alpha neurofeedback, and the ability to generate alpha with the eyes open and the lights on could develop different skills and results than if the procedure were carried out in total darkness or with the eyes closed. Citation needed. Alpha states do not seem to have the universal stress alleviating power indicated by early observations too. However, this is not cause to reject the concept of biofeedback entirely. Many other biofeedback treatments have emerged since Kamiya's alpha experiments. At one point, Martin Orne and others challenged the claim that alpha biofeedback actually involved the training of an individual to voluntarily regulate brainwave activity. 3 James Hart and Joe Kamiya, then at UC San Francisco's Langley Porter Neuropsychiatric Institute, published a paper, for proving the efficacy of EEG biofeedback training, and that it was not just related to visuo/motor eyes open or closed factors. In the late 60s and early 70s, Barbara Brown, one of the most effective popularizers of biofeedback, wrote several books on biofeedback, making the public much more aware of the technology. The books included New Mind New Body, with a foreword from Hugh Downs, and Stress and the Art of Biofeedback. Brown took a creative approach to neurofeedback, linking brainwave self-regulation to a switching relay which turned on an electric train. The work of Barry Sterman, Joel F. Luber and others has indicated a high efficacy for beta training, involving the role of sensoromotor rhythmic EEG activity. 5 This training has been used in the treatment of epilepsy. 6-7, attention deficit disorder and hyperactive disorder. 8 and other mood disorders. Citation needed. The sensoromotor rhythm, SMR, is rhythmic activity between 12 and 16 Hz that can be recorded from an area near the sensoromotor cortex. SMR is found in waking states and is very similar if not identical to the sleep spindles that are recorded in the second stage of sleep. Studies have shown that enhancement of sensoromotor activity through operant conditioning designed to increase SMR is an anticonvulsant process and is therefore an effective treatment for epilepsy. Citation needed. For example, Sterman has shown that both monkeys and cats who had undergone SMR training had elevated thresholds for the convulsant chemical monomethylhydrazine. These studies indicate that SMR is associated with an inhibitory process in the motor system and therefore increasing SMR through operant conditioning increases the ability to control seizures. 7 Most individuals treated with biofeedback in research studies have been sufferers of the most severe epilepsy for whom anticonvulsant drug therapy has proven ineffective. Citation needed. However, even among these most severe cases, beta and SMR training has been found to produce an average 70% reduction in seizures and to facilitate increased control of seizures in 82% of patients. Citation needed. Luber addressed attention disorders using essentially the same protocol. Citation needed. His research indicates that inhibition of motor function also inhibits input function, which is related to attention. Luber's protocol, which has been adopted by most practitioners as the standard protocol for treating patients with attention disorders, is to inhibit 2 to 10 Hz slow waves, alpha and theta, as well as 19 to 22 Hz waves and encouraging activity in the 12 to 19 Hz range. Citation needed. This procedure has been supported since alpha activity is known to decrease during cognitive functions and to be inversely related to metabolism. Citation needed. Luber's hypothesis for what is happening in an AD brain is that there is a decreased metabolism and decreased blood flow to the subcallosal cortex. Alpha is inhibited to counter these problems. Citation needed. Liber has published 10-year follow-ups on cases and found that in about 80% of patients biofeedback can substantially improve the symptoms of AD and ADHD, and these changes are maintained. Citation needed. Currently, treatment for attention disorders is the most common application of EEG biofeedback. Citation needed. However, the treatment is also effective in the treatment of traumatic head injuries and sleep disorders as well as epilepsy. Citation needed. Neuroimaging studies have correlated ADHD with abnormal functioning in the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC, during tasks involving selective attention. In 2006, Johanna Levesque and colleagues at the University of Montreal published results from their fMRI study showing normalization of ACC activation during a selective attention task in ADHD subjects who had undergone neurofeedback training. Levesque, 2006. Subjects in the study were randomly assigned to either the neurofeedback treatment group or a no-treatment control group, and subjects from the latter showed no difference in ACC activation compared to their baseline. In 1974, the pioneer Canadian psychologist, holding registration number 1 as a registered psychologist. Citation needed. D.A. Quirk heard a presentation by Sterman and discussed with him the method. Quirk immediately conferred with his colleague, G. von Hilsheimer, director of the Green Valley Psychiatric Hospital in Orange City, Florida. Citation needed. Quirk and von Hilsheimer began applying EEG biofeedback, training the amplitude of 4 to 7 Hz, theta, down, whilst training the amplitude of 13 to 14 Hz, sensorimotor, up over the fissure of Roland, 10-20 locations C3 and C4. From 1974 until his retirement in 1995, Quirk trained 2,700 felons incarcerated at the Ontario Correctional Institute near Toronto using temperature at the left ring finger, skin conductance, palm to palm, and EEG detected at 10-20 sites C3 and C4. Citation needed. The 3-year recidivism rate for these felons was 15%, which compares well to the range of 40 to 70% widely reported in the correction literature. Citation needed. A significant bibliography on the efficacy of EEG biofeedback, documented in refereed journals, is listed at isnr.org. For years, EEG biofeedback was treated as a minor part of the field of biofeedback, particularly by the Primary Biofeedback Organization, AAPB. In 1993, 3 different efforts, somewhat overlapping, dramatically increased the energy and influence of EEG biofeedback. In February 1993, Rob Call, president of Future Health, organized the first annual Winter Brain Meeting, in Key West, Florida. The meeting brought together many of the leading figures in the field, and it created a setting where the leaders could discuss and plan strategies for building greater influence and organization to move the field forward. In April 1993, Ken Takaki, Jim Smith and Bob Grove organized a meeting of leaders in the field of neurofeedback on Catalina Island, immediately before the 1993 AAPB meeting. Further planning took place at this meeting and the beginnings of SSNR occurred. SSNR equals Society for the Study of Neuronal Regulation. Since then, SSNR has evolved to become ISNR, International Society for Neuronal Regulation. Immediately after the Catalina meeting, at the 1993 AAPB meeting, a new EEG section was formed, after plenty of lively discussion. It quickly grew to become the biggest section of the organization. Things were never the same at AAPB. Neurofeedback had become a mainstream part of the field, though it took a few years to fully integrate into the annual meeting and journals. Within the last 5 to 10 years, neurofeedback has taken a new approach, in taking a second look at deep states. Alpha-theta training has been used in the treatment of alcoholism, first reported by Peniston in 1989. Citation needed, and other addictions as well as post-traumatic stress disorder, the dysphoric disorders of women, musicians, and psychopathic offenders. Citation needed. This low-frequency training differs greatly from the high-frequency beta and SMR training that has been practiced for over 30 years and is reminiscent of the original alpha training of Elmer Green and Joe Kamiya. Beta and SMR training can be considered a more directly physiological approach, strengthening sensoromotor inhibition in the cortex and inhibiting alpha patterns, which slow metabolism. Alpha-theta training, however, derives from the psychotherapeutic model and involves accessing of painful or repressed memories through the alpha-theta state. The alpha-theta state is a term that comes from the representation on the EEG. During this therapy, when the alpha wave's amplitude is crossed over by the rising amplitude of theta waves, the state is called the alpha-theta crossover state and is associated with resolution of traumatic memories. Citation needed. The physiological mechanisms behind these therapies are very unclear. EEGs of alcoholics have revealed an inability to produce the alpha waves generally associated with feelings of relaxation and comfort. Citation needed. However, following the use of alcohol, theta and alpha waves increase. Citation needed. This can be expected considering the drowsiness and relaxation are common effects of alcohol. Therefore, alcoholics may be self-medicating their abnormal level of low-frequency waves. Studies have demonstrated a high efficacy of alpha-theta therapy in treating alcoholism. Citation needed. Peniston and Kulkowski found that while alcoholics in a control group receiving standard treatment showed significant increases in beta-endorphin levels as a result of stress caused by abstinence from alcohol, alcoholics receiving the alpha-theta treatment did not. On 4-year follow-up, only 20% of the traditionally treated group of alcoholics remained sober, compared with 80% of the experimental group who received neurofeedback training. Citation needed. Low Energy Neurofeedback System, LENS. The Low Energy Neurofeedback System, LENS, uses a device, under control of a computer program, to produce electromagnetic fields and apply them as brain stimuli. The stimuli are applied by EEG leads that serve as bidirectional conduits for both the stimuli and returning EEG signals. Treatment sessions are very short, typically only a few minutes. Treatments that are too long or use incorrect settings can cause hyperarousal, headache, irritability, nausea, etc. During treatment sessions, the subject is completely passive, there is no auditory or visual feedback. LENS treatment is preceded by a diagnostic quantitative EEG, QEEG, brain map to identify zones of the brain at which the various brain waves deviate from the norm. Both electrode placement and system settings are determined by the condition being treated and the clinician's interpretation of the brain map. System settings must be adjusted by the clinician over the course of treatment to accommodate the effects of treatment. The number of treatments needed to achieve improvements for ADHD, depression, PTSD, and seizures is claimed to be fewer than for more traditional neural feedback methods. At least 2 books detailing the concept and methodology of LENS are available commercially: The Healing Power of Neurofeedback, The Revolutionary LENS Technique for Restoring Optimal Brain Function by Stephen Larson and Tom Hartman, paperback, May 2, 2006, and LENS, The Low Energy Neurofeedback System, by D. Corridon Hammond, paperback February 13, 2007. Neurofeedback in practice. A common professional neurofeedback therapy nowadays goes as follows: 1. In an intake of about 90 minutes the patient will get a questionnaire and a first EEG reading. The questionnaire specifies the complaints and filters out people with serious psychological problems. The EEG serves both for diagnosis and as a reference to check later whether there is progress. In about 20% of the patient's neurofeedback has no effect. 2. The EEG recording is typically done on a few points on the head. It results in a brain map, quantitative EEG. This is a series of maps, for each frequency 1, where for each measured spot the average level of activity is shown. The brain map is compared to a database to determine spots of over and under activity compared to the average people of the patient's age and sex. There are several commercial providers of such databases. 3. On the basis of the complaints, the brain map, and the database results, a therapy is chosen. This involves an electrode on a single spot on the head that needs to become more or less active for specific frequencies. During the therapy the patient gets feedback that helps them improve. This feedback may involve, for example, a simple light or tone, some game where good brainwaves are rewarded and bad ones punished, or some image that becomes less sharp when the patient loses focus. 4. A typical therapy takes 20 to 40 sessions. Some forms of psychotherapy are considerably faster, so neurofeedback is not always the most efficient solution. At the beginning of each session, the patient reports the course of his complaints and also mentions other mental effects. On the basis of this report, the therapy may be adjusted. In some cases, a patient is allowed to take a feedback machine home and have most, but not all, sessions there. See also, psychophysiology, the study of the connections between neurobiology and psychology. E.g. biofeedback, a generalized approach to neuroregulation. Siegfried Othmer, Susan F. Othmer, and David A. Kaiser. Publication date, September 16, 2003. Epilepsy. Epilepsy is listed among the most difficult conditions to address with EEG training because of the variety with which epilepsy manifests, because of the ongoing structural deficits which may underlie the condition, and also because historically it has been the most intractable cases which have been referred for EEG training. This historical circumstance introduces a bias into how matters are viewed, since in fact there are many types of seizure that respond quite readily to EEG training. Since training was done at the sensoromotor strip, and was deemed to address the motor system specifically, Sterman argued initially that the training could be expected to be beneficial only for seizures with a predominantly motor symptomatology. Subsequently, however, a controlled study was successfully accomplished with primarily temporal lobe or complex partial seizures, Lanz, 1988. The Sterman protocol was replicated for seizures in a number of laboratories and by a number of groups, see references for Table 1. The technique failed to be acknowledged at the time, however, because of confounding issues regarding anticipated changes in the EEG, Qui, 1979. The CAT EEG had manifested a countable increase in incidence of bursts of SMR rhythmic activity with training. The human EEG does not exhibit such bursts except during stage 2 sleep. And whereas there was in fact an increase in sleep spindles with training in epileptic subjects, the various studies which were intended to replicate Sterman's findings did not yield consistent EEG changes in the waking state, Kaplan, 1975. We now understand that this is not a contradiction. The human EEG remains more desynchronized in the waking state than the CAT EEG, and observable bursts would now be considered anomalous. Some individuals did in fact show increased amplitudes of the EEG in the SMR subsequent to long-term reinforcement. Others tended toward normalization of their EEG characteristics, which in many instances meant an overall decrease in EEG amplitudes, even within the training band. At the relevant time, however, during the 1970s and 1980s, the lack of consistent EEG changes accompanying the training was thought to be fatal to the hypothesis that EEG training had taken place. The behavioral benefit of EEG biofeedback training that had been replicated in all of the studies was therefore attributed instead to nonspecific factors. Subsequent developments, in our clinical setting, extended the seizure work to absence seizures as well. These generally require higher frequency training of 15 to 18 Hz in addition to the SMR training. It is important to make the distinction that in the use of EEG training with seizures, no claim is made that the seizure focus is in any sense extinguished or annihilated. Rather, it is claimed that by enhancing stability conditions in the surrounding healthy brain tissue, the irritable focus will no longer as readily lead to spreading of paroxysmal activity and hence to focal or generalized seizures. The effect of enhancing stability can often be additive to the effect of anticonvulsant medication. It may also lead to the reduction or even elimination of such medication. More than half of seizures occur at night, and most of these are closely associated with sleep transitions, particularly with falling asleep and waking. This association suggests an intimate connection of seizure susceptibility with stability of arousal. Similarly, about half of all seizures are associated with identifiable events of brain trauma. This of course suggests a connection between the seizure susceptibility with the specific organic loss suffered in the brain injury. However, an equally compelling case can be made that the association is in fact with arousal dysregulation here as well. As already indicated in our discussion of brain injury, the predominant symptomatology associated with such injury relates not to the specific location of injury, but to generalized function, in particular the management of arousal. Hence, a brain with an intrinsic seizure vulnerability could simply have been pushed over the edge by a minor head injury. The hypothesis that efficacy for epilepsy is traceable in large measure to improved regulation of arousal comes from an unusual quarter. A Swedish study has demonstrated some 60% seizure reduction in children by behavioral methods alone, Dahl, 1992. The strategies typically involve deliberate changes in arousal level when the subject anticipates a seizure. As it happens, the 60% reduction is also the average seizure reduction obtained using the Sterman protocol in the various published studies. The nexus with arousal dysfunction helps us to address the structuralist objection that the seizure focus should be impervious to such an intervention as EEG biofeedback. Whether articulated or not, it is this structuralist objection that has resulted in neurologists dismissing this technique out of hand for 30 years. It is in fact quite sufficient to argue that only healthy brain tissue is affected by the training in order to explain the clinical findings. Excerpt from Applied Neurophysiology and Brain Biofeedback. Brain wave measurement and frequencies of healers. The fact that the brain emits measurable frequencies has been known since the beginning of the last century. In the 1960s, it was discovered that a person could exert some control over these frequencies, and the term biofeedback was coined to describe this process. With the advent of increased computing power and a deeper understanding of the brain, the research focus is now on neurofeedback. The year 2010 saw the first hard evidence of neuroplastic changes occurring directly in the brain after voluntary control of brain rhythms. TROSETAL, endogenous control of waking brain rhythms induces neuroplasticity in humans. The range of brain frequencies has been divided up and named as follows: delta, 0 to 4 Hz, deep nighttime sleep; theta, 4 to 7 Hz, dreams at night and trance state of somnambulism; alpha, 8 to 12 Hz, background brain activity in the waking state. Named alpha because it was the first one discovered by Hansberger in 1908. Beta, 12 to 30 Hz, awake, alert, focused; gamma, 30 to 100 Hz, certain cognitive or motor functions. The diagrams below are a 3D representation of brainwave patterns recorded using an IBVA recorder. Across the width of the diagram is the frequency from delta on the left to gamma on the right. Time is recorded in the length of the strip, each diagram being about a 5-minute segment of time. Amplitude is shown in the height in microvolts. The first diagram is that of a client in a non-focused state and shows a random distribution across the ranges. The second diagram shows the coherence and specificity in Jack's brain as he works with the reconnective healing registered energy frequencies. The left and right hemispheres of the brain appear in separate windows. The left window represents the left hemisphere of the person. Recordings made in September 2010. Note, these EEG, electroencephalography, experiments were done by Jean-Charles Chabot, a hypnotherapist specialized in life-between-lives spiritual hypnosis, who uses the IBVA recorder in his practice. www.life-between-lives.ca. Note, Jean-Charles and I carried out these experiments without knowing whether such an experiment had been done before. On October 29, 2012, reading Ervin Laszlo's Science and the Akashic Field, p. 152153, I discovered a description of a similar experiment showing the same result and giving a bit more information about the condition. Laszlo's book was first published in 2004, a new edition appeared in 2007, both from Inner Traditions in Vermont. An experiment carried out in the presence of this writer took place in southern Germany in the spring of 2001. At a seminar attended by about 100 people, Dr. Günter Haffelder, head of the Institute for Communication and Brain Research of Stuttgart, measured the EEG patterns of Dr. Maria Sajai, a trained psychologist and gifted natural healer, together with that of a young man who volunteered from among the participants. The young man remained in the seminar hall while the healer was taken to a separate room. Both the healer and the young man were wired with electrodes, and their EEG patterns were projected on a large screen in the hall. The healer diagnosed the health problems of the subject, while he sat with closed eyes in a light meditative state. When the healer found the subject's areas of organic dysfunction, she sent information designed to compensate for it. During the approximately 15 minutes that the healer was concentrating on her task, her EEG waves dipped into the deep delta region, between 0 and 3 Hz per second, with a few sudden eruptions of wave amplitude. This was surprising in itself, because when someone's brain waves descend into the delta region, he or she is usually in a state of deep sleep. But the healer was fully awake, in a state of intense concentration. Even more surprising was that the test subject exhibited the same delta wave pattern that showed up in his EEG display about 2 seconds after it appeared in the EEG of the healer. Yet they had no sensory contact with each other. Alpha brain waves, definition, functions, and benefits article by Brainwaves Jr. What are alpha brain waves? Alpha brain waves are a sign of relaxed activity in your brain. Alpha brainwaves are defined as brainwaves that cycle between the frequency 8 Hz, 12 Hz. They are commonly produced in synchronized fashion connecting both hemispheres of your brain, though they can be found solely in the right hemisphere as well. Alpha brainwaves are the dominant brainwave activity when your body and mind are able to relax. If you have ever practiced meditation, yoga, or even felt relaxed after drinking alcohol, you have experienced alpha brain waves. Alpha brain wave activity is common among highly creative individuals who have a clear mind or are experiencing relaxation. If you close your eyes for a minute or so, your alpha brain wave activity will significantly increase. As you open your eyes, the more stressful beta brain waves become the dominant pattern. In comparison, as a child you will have had significantly greater amounts of alpha brainwave activity than you will as an adult. Alpha brain waves have long been considered to be regarded as the healthiest brainwave range, but also the safest brainwave range to entrain, especially at 10 Hz, e.g. 10 cycles per second. As an early teen or child, you likely had a dominant alpha brainwave pattern. Should you choose to experience a dominant alpha brainwave again, I recommend checking the products section. Most of the products recommended will do a nice job at increasing your alpha brainwave activity. I want to make it clear that there isn't a single brainwave state that is better than the others to be in, each have their advantages and disadvantages. However, most people are lacking in at least one brainwave pattern. For the majority of individuals, alpha brainwaves happen to be the lacking frequency range. Things like environmental stressors, fear, anxiety, tension, and overworking tend to deplete your alpha wave activity. Below, I will outline several benefits of alpha brain waves and also discuss ways in which you can naturally increase your alpha activity. Benefits of alpha brain waves: relaxing thoughts/relaxed body. The alpha brainwave is produced when your body calms down and your mind is completely relaxed. Your brain's thinking is slower, your mind is clear, and you may even feel slightly drowsy. Your body has zero stress, tension, anxiety, or other feelings of being nervous. Increasing your alpha brainwave activity is a profound way to reduce your stress. Access creative states. If you consider yourself to have above average creativity, chances are that you often experience an alpha brainwave state. Artists, innovative thinkers, and singers are generally found to have higher alpha activity than the average person. If you feel that your creativity is lacking, an increase in your alpha waves will feel great. Enhanced problem solving. Most people cannot seem to tap their alpha waves to help them problem solve. Alpha waves integrate both hemispheres of your brain for better communication and clearer thinking. The problem with lacking alpha waves is that your left hemisphere is pulling all the weight in solving a problem, when your right hemisphere has a solution waiting to communicate to the left. Increasing your alpha brain waves can benefit artists, writers, for writer's block, and creative thinkers. You certainly won't feel mentally stuck in the alpha state. In order to tap your inner creativity, your brain must be able to produce synchronous bursts of alpha waves. Calming, centered emotions. Alpha brain waves will put you in a calm emotional state. You will not feel powerful emotions, however, you will feel content and centered. If you are stressed out or nerved up, you likely haven't had access to the alpha brain waves in a long time. Getting back in an alpha state will stabilize your intense emotions and you will feel good about yourself. Optimal athletic performance. Interestingly enough, if you are an athlete, you could significantly improve your performance by entraining some alpha brain waves. There is published evidence showing that just before a golfer hits their best shot or a basketball player sinks a shot, think LeBron and Kobe, alpha activity bursts in the left hemisphere of their brain. Elite marksmen also have shown a significant burst of alpha wave activity before perfect shots. Also unique is the fact that the EEGs, brainwave measurement, of proathletes are very likely to display the alpha rhythm, whereas newbie athletes and even decent athletes do not demonstrate any alpha activity. The best brainwave to entrain for peak performance has been widely considered to be 10 Hz, i.e. 10 cycles per second. I encourage athletes to give some alpha entrainment a shot and see if it puts you in the zone. Reductions of fear, tension, stress, nervousness, anxiety. Increasing your alpha brain waves automatically leads to decreasing your fears, tension, stress, nerves, and anxiety. If you have ever gotten so caught up in a stressful or fearful state, that you literally forgot how to relax, then having the ability to increase your alpha brain waves would feel like you've been given a miracle drug. Everything seems to flow. Being able to access flow means that you are able to tap a state of mind where all of life's events seem to pass quickly and all challenges are easily and quickly overcome. Flow is a period of time when you do not have any resistance or problems. You are in a mental state with optimal brainwave stimulation. You are not thinking too rapidly as to stress yourself out, yet you are also not thinking too slow as to be tired. You are right in the middle between the two. You feel balanced and understand that you are in a desirable state of mental functioning. Ability to tap super learning. The ability to learn quickly and effortlessly has been described as the phenomena of super learning. Basically, your brain is able to remember and recall information with less effort than normal. Alpha waves will allow your brain to retain large quantities of information. This is due to the fact that both hemispheres of your brain are integrated and communicating with each other. Improved immune system functioning. Your alpha waves are responsible for amping up your immune system. They have been linked to health, recovery from sickness, and serve as protection from stress-related illnesses. Stress can quickly ramp up damage on your immune system if you go long periods without taking some time to relax, thus increasing alpha activity. Think positive. Research indicates that due to the calm, well-being as a result of increasing alpha brainwave activity, positive thinking and positive emotions also result. I can personally testify for this one. After having gotten caught up in stress for a prolonged period, my thinking became increasingly positive after a few sessions of alpha entrainment, likely resulting from increased mental peace and calmness. Alpha brain waves equals neutral antidepressant. Alpha brain waves allow for increased release of an important neurotransmitter called serotonin. Serotonin production usually drops to lower than normal levels in your brain when you feel depressed. In fact, most antidepressants nowadays aim to increase low levels of serotonin in the brain. Do a search for SSRIs to find out more. For these reasons, it makes sense that alpha brain waves may help ward off your blues. Internal awareness. Alpha brainwaves are associated with an increased awareness of yourself, body and mind. Whereas beta brainwaves cause the mind to focus more on external events, the alpha brainwaves enhance the overall awareness of oneself. People with higher than average amounts of alpha brainwaves. Outgoing people, extroverts. Generally, if you are more outgoing and consider yourself extroverted, you have more alpha brainwaves than introverts. The consensus seems to be that if you have plenty of alpha activity, you are more than 3x as likely to be outgoing. It makes perfect sense. Introverts are less comfortable during social interaction, whereas being social comes natural for extroverts. People who meditate. If you practice meditation, then you have definitely accessed the alpha brainwave state. Each time as you close your eyes to meditate, you experience a surge of alpha brainwave activity. If you want to naturally increase your alpha activity, try meditation. As a child, you tend to experience much greater activity in the alpha range. As you age, your brain shifts away from alpha to another range, commonly the beta range. It is important to recognize that even though you are not still a child, you can still have access to alpha waves. The majority of the adult population would benefit from increasing their alpha brain waves. What are beta brain waves? Beta brain waves are considered to be among the fastest brainwave frequencies and are documented as brain waves within the frequency range of 12 Hz, 38 Hz, or 12 to 38 cycles per second. They are typically produced by the left hemisphere of your brain, but can be synchronized. Each time you solve a tough math problem, logic puzzle, or read a book, your beta brain waves kick in. People who think logically tend to have a lot of beta brainwave activity. Adults tend to have more beta brainwaves than children and teens, and beta brainwaves have been known to increase as you get older. In the majority of healthy adults, beta waves seem to be the dominant rhythm. Beta waves have also been associated with an increased ability to focus on our external reality. When we experience too many beta brain waves, there can be problems like stress and anxiety. However, when produced in normal amounts, there are definitely many benefits to be had from experiencing beta brain waves. How can you experience beta brain waves? If you want to experience logical thinking, the ability to think more critically, and cultivate the ability to be quick-witted, then you may want to experience beta brain waves. People who have increased their beta waves have been known to increase their IQ and productivity. Beta brain waves have also been associated as being a natural antidepressant, similar to gamma brain waves. People have recorded that they were able to experience more motivation after increasing their beta brain waves. Tapping the highly energetic mental state of beta is very possible now that there is such solid, scientifically supported brainwave technology. Cultivating brainwave flexibility by learning how to access other brainwave states of awareness like beta is a valuable skill. There are many benefits and new experiences that can be had by experiencing an altered state of consciousness. If you'd like to experience beta brain waves, I suggest that you check out some brainwave products, many of which you can test out for free before you buy. Read below for more benefits that result from beta brainwave entrainment. Benefits of beta brainwaves: if you are able to access your beta brainwave state, you will know and understand exactly what it feels like. When you are in a beta state, you are far from relaxed. You may have a lot of energy in the form of nervousness, excitement, or anxiety. When you are in a beta brainwave state, you are able to think rapidly and quickly come up with logical solutions to problems. The beta wave state is ideal for solving math problems, conducting research, reading books, and writing articles. Each time a student takes a test, they experience a large surge in their beta brainwave activity. Another side effect from having lots of beta wave activity is being more socially outgoing. Talk show hosts, lawyers, radio announcers, and people involved in debates tend to experience significant increases in their beta brainwave activity each time they begin talking. Beta waves increase your ability to hold an interesting and stimulating conversation with others. You also have feelings of excitement and energy while talking to someone else. Due to the fact that excitement and nervous energy accompany the beta range, many people experience leaps in their motivation to take action. If you've ever read about someone being able to perform an amazing feat out of fear, i.e. out of adrenaline, then you understand that these beta waves can be highly motivating and action-oriented. If you've ever run away from someone because you were scared, your beta brain waves kicked in at their highest levels. It is natural that people become more goal-oriented when their beta waves dominate their mental activity. Though they may be using this fear or excitement type energy, it does produce results. You can get a heck of a lot better performance out of someone who is performing as if their life depended on it, versus someone who is calm and not very concerned with how they end up performing. It is because of this increase in energy from the beta state that sometimes peak performance is associated with the higher range beta frequencies. What are delta brain waves? Delta brain waves are the brain's slowest frequency range, cycling at a rate of 1 to 4 times per second, e.g. 1 Hz, 4 Hz. Delta brain waves become active in your brain when you are in the deeper stages of sleep, e.g. stage 3 and stage 4. They are associated with being completely unconscious, i.e. you usually won't know or remember anything while delta waves are dominant. Delta brain waves have been known to oscillate throughout all parts of the brain and are not usually synchronized. Of all brainwave ranges, the delta waves have the greatest amplitude and are responsible for the slowest form of mental processing. Having access to the delta brainwave state not only implies that we are in a deep stage of sleep though. In some cases, people can learn to increase their delta activity. People with high amounts of delta waves have been found to have increased empathy, or understanding of others' emotions. Other interesting effects have been documented as a side effect of having delta brainwaves. Delta brainwaves benefits. Delta brainwaves have been proven to have a number of beneficial side effects. When delta brainwaves increase, so does your natural ability to release anti-aging hormones, tap an increased amount of empathy, understanding how others feel, heal the mind and repair your muscles, and access the deepest possible states of relaxation. Other side effects as a result of delta brain waves include, the release of natural growth hormone, the release of melatonin, connecting with your intuition and accessing deep states of spirituality. Another great thing about delta brain waves is that they have been known to reduce levels of cortisol in your body. Cortisol is a hormone released when you are under stress that basically kills off brain cells and can cause damage to parts of your body. Cortisol has been linked to quicker aging, while having less cortisol has been known to be associated with anti-aging. For some individuals with high amounts of stress, delta brain waves may also work great at reducing adrenaline levels. The great thing about delta brain waves is that they are able to connect you with deeper parts of your unconscious mind. Even though you must travel down through alpha brain waves and theta brain waves before you can reach delta, many people are able to greatly appreciate a delta brainwaves experience. If you spend too much time caught up in the higher ranges of brain waves, then chances are you may be able to benefit from delta waves, especially if you increase them right before you go to bed. Since delta brainwaves are associated with sleep, listening to a brainwave entrainment session in the delta frequency range of 1 Hz to 4 Hz will do a nice job at helping you fall asleep. Advanced monk meditators have also been known to access the delta brainwaves range when they practice meditation. The average, less experienced meditator usually is only able to access the alpha or theta brainwaves range. However, if you practice long enough and get proper training, you too will be able to tap into your delta awareness. Having a brainwave pattern that is dominated by delta brainwaves is impossible if the person is awake. Many people have also reported having spiritual experiences and sometimes OOBE, out-of-body experiences, while having delta brainwave activity. These paranormal experiences are more common if a person has access to slower levels of their brain waves. People with delta brain waves typically, delta brain waves are most commonly documented in EEG brain activity while a person is asleep. However, other individuals like babies, very young children, monks/advanced meditators, people who have had near-death experiences, people suffering from brain damage, and people with brain damage have also been known to have higher than average amounts of delta brain waves. If you saw a boxer get K.O.D. knocked out, he would have been experiencing delta brain waves. If you have ever been put to sleep with anesthesia, you were knocked into your delta brain wave state. Other individuals who lack focus and suffer from attention deficit can also have high amounts of delta brain waves, even though having theta waves is more common. What are theta brain waves? Theta brain waves are the second slowest frequency of brain waves. They typically cycle at a rate of 4 to 7 times per second, 4 Hz, 7 Hz. Theta brain waves have long been associated with early stages of sleep and the process of dreaming. Theta brain waves are of high amplitude and usually kick in when you experience powerful surges of emotion. Theta waves have been associated with states of enhanced creativity, super learning, deeper relaxation, daydreaming, and sleep dream activity. Theta brain waves can kick in when you have a spiritual experience or while you are in a highly creative state. On other occasions, theta waves may dominate our brainwave activity when we are not able to concentrate. People with attention deficit problems, AD and ADHD, are not able to shift out of the theta state when events that require focus, i.e. taking a test, arise. This makes schoolwork much harder for people with attention problems. However, the majority of healthy people are able to naturally shift their brainwave state from beta to alpha to theta and back from theta to alpha to beta in cases where extreme mental focus is required. Benefits of theta brainwaves: if you are able to recall how relaxed and carefree you were as a child, then you are able to remember what it felt like to access your theta brainwaves. Children tend to have significantly higher amounts of theta waves than do adults, which is why children are not generally as stressed out as their parents. Children are able to say what's on their mind and not be fearful of trying something new. This is the theta brainwave state. Accessing your theta brainwaves means having a deeper emotional connection with yourself. Generally, people have much stronger emotions, whether they be happy or sad, while in the theta range. If you have been too caught up in the beta state for an extended period of time, chances are good that you forgot what your natural emotions feel like. Some theta brainwave entrainment will get you more closely connected with your inner self and back to experiencing natural emotions, not artificially or stress-induced ones. Not to mention, theta waves have been linked to having a strong intuition. Have you ever gotten a strong gut feeling about something and your gut turned out to be right? Well, it has been proven that theta brainwaves are accessed when you have an instinctual type feeling in the pit of your stomach. Much of the time, our gut instinct turns out to be right, even when our logical beta brainwaves want to take over. Other benefits from having more theta brainwave activity include a connection to your subconscious mind or subconscious processing, advanced problem solving, and learning ability. Each and every day, you receive subconscious programming from your environment that you may not be aware of. This information and processing cycles into your brain and has actually been found to have an influence on behavior. You can benefit from tapping your theta waves to connect with your subconscious because it will allow you to reprogram your brain with ideas and beliefs that you truly want to believe. This helps you avoid falling victim to environmentally induced thought patterns. People with theta waves have been known to be able to think far more creatively than those who don't. Usually musicians, painters, designers, or anyone with a job that involves a certain degree of creativity, has more theta waves than average. It has also been found that people with lower levels of anxiety, stress, and neurosis, are able to maintain stable theta brainwave activity. Theta brainwave activity has also been noted among individuals who are able to learn quickly. This is due to the fact that, like alpha waves, theta brain waves can induce a similar state of super learning. In fact, the theta state of super learning has been found to be the most powerful state for learning a new language. This makes perfect sense due to the fact that children, who have high amounts of theta activity, are able to learn new languages much more quickly and easily than adults. Additional theta brainwave benefits are long-term memory improvements, improvements in the healing of the brain and body, the ability to hyperfocus, i.e. get in the zone, and boosted immune system functioning, as is true with all forms of slower brainwave. People with theta brainwaves: groups of people that already experience theta waves include people who meditate, people who are extroverted, children, artists, and inventors. Meditation can allow you to tap into your theta brainwaves quickly and experience a deeper connection with your subconscious. It has been documented that theta brainwaves also occur in extroverts when they communicate and during emotional bonding. What are gamma brainwaves? The fastest documented brainwave frequency range is that of gamma brainwaves, which oscillate within the range of 40 Hz to 70 Hz. Gamma brainwaves have the smallest amplitude on an EEG in comparison to the other four basic types of brainwave frequencies. Gamma brainwaves have long been considered the brain's information and sensory binding brainwave, or the brainwave that is able to link and process information from all parts of the brain. Having high amounts of gamma brainwave activity has been associated with having high levels of intelligence, being compassionate, having high amounts of self-control, and feelings of natural happiness. Gamma brain waves have also been linked to having a great memory and an increased perception of reality. People lacking in gamma brainwaves tend to experience difficulties with learning and mental processing. Usually people with impaired or retarded mental functioning tend to have significantly less gamma brainwave activity than those who have average and above average intelligences. There seems to be a correlation with higher amounts of gamma brainwave activity and increased brain functioning ability. Benefits of gamma brainwaves: people with higher amounts of gamma brainwaves are lucky due to the fact that they will often experience improvements in memory and their ability to vividly recall past experiences. One frequency in the gamma waves range, which cycles 40 times per second, e.g. at a rate of 40 Hz, has been known to regulate memory processing in the brain. If you are currently having difficulty remembering information like names, dates, events, plans, etc., you would likely benefit from increasing your gamma brainwave range. Gamma brainwaves are also known to boost your perception of reality through your 5 senses. Gamma brainwave activity is responsible for making smells more powerful, increasing your visual acuity, sharpening your hearing, and making foods taste better. Those who lack gamma brainwaves may have the same foods or be put in the same environment, but their brains will not have as much sensory-rich processing as individuals with gamma activity. The gamma brainwave range is able to properly combine or bind your senses and memory together for one ultimate experience. This is why on a memorable night you'll often remember the music that was playing, the aroma of the atmosphere, what you saw, the foods you ate, etc. The gamma brainwave state is an incredibly focused one and allows us to get the richest possible sensory experience as a result of our external world. Gamma brain waves have also been linked with the ability to process large amounts of information in relatively small amounts of time. Think of having more gamma activity as getting a processor upgrade for your brain. People without much gamma activity literally cannot imagine what they are missing out on, unless they have experienced gamma activity before. One of the best side effects from gamma brainwave entrainment is that you'll naturally begin to feel more compassionate towards others and internally happier. Gamma brainwaves have been documented as being a powerful antidepressant type brainwave. This makes complete sense due to the fact that people suffering from clinical depression tend to have lower than average amounts of gamma brainwaves. People with gamma brainwaves: everyone has some gamma brainwave activity, but some groups of people have more gamma activity than others. People with plenty of gamma brainwave activity include people in advanced stages of meditation and people living in a state of peak performance. Gamma brainwaves is the most common brainwave state for top-notch athletic performers to be in when they perform perfectly, i.e., when Tiger Woods sinks putt from far away or when an Olympic performer receives a perfect score from the judges. Brain oscillations reveal we experience the world in rapid snapshots. May 14, 2012. Neuroscientists from the University of Glasgow have demonstrated that our brains experience the world in discrete snapshots determined by the cycles of brain rhythms. While studying a brain rhythm associated with visual cortex, they used a simple trick to affect and reset the oscillations of this rhythm. It has long been suspected that humans do not experience the world continuously, but rather in rapid snapshots. Now, researchers at the University of Glasgow have demonstrated this is indeed the case. Just as the body goes through a 24-hour sleep-wake cycle controlled by a circadian clock, brain function undergoes such cyclic activity, albeit at a much faster rate. Professor Gregor Thut of the Institute of Neuroscience and Psychology said, "Rhythms are intrinsic to biological systems. The circadian rhythm, with its very slow periodicity of sleep and wake cycles every 24 hours, has an obvious, periodic effect on bodily functions. Brain oscillations, the recurrent neural activity that we see in the brain, also show periodicity but cycle at much faster speeds. What we wanted to know was whether brain function was affected in a cyclic manner by these rapid oscillations. The researchers studied a prominent brain rhythm associated with visual cortex functioning that cycles at a rate of 10 times per second, 10 Hz. They used a simple trick to affect the oscillations of this rhythm, which was presenting a brief sound to reset the oscillation. Testing subsequent visual perception, by using transcranial magnetic stimulation of visual cortex, revealed a cyclic pattern at the very rapid rate of brain oscillations, in time with the underlying brain waves. Professor Thutt said, rhythmicity therefore is indeed omnipresent not only in brain activity but also brain function. For perception, this means that despite experiencing the world as a continuum, we do not sample our world continuously but in discrete snapshots determined by the cycles of brain rhythms. The research, Sounds Reset Rhythms of Visual Cortex and Corresponding Human Visual Perception, is published in the journal Current Biology. Conscious Perception from a Global Network of Neurons, June 12, 2012. Neurons in the lateral prefrontal cortex represent the content of consciousness. The red trace depicts neural activity, neuronal discharges, in the lateral prefrontal cortex when a stimulus is consciously perceived for 1 second, while the green trace depicts neural activity when the same stimulus is suppressed from awareness. MPI for Biological Cybernetics. New research from scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics supports the view that the content of consciousness is not localized in a unique cortical area but, rather, that a global network of neurons from different areas of the brain is responsible for it. Consciousness is a selective process that allows only a part of the sensory input to reach awareness. But up to today it has yet to be clarified which areas of the brain are responsible for the content of conscious perception. Theofanis Panagiotaropoulos and his colleagues, researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Biological Cybernetics in Tübingen and University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, have now discovered that the content of consciousness is not localized in a unique cortical area, but is most likely an emergent property of global networks of neuronal populations. The question which parts of the brain are responsible for the things that reach our awareness is one of the main puzzles in neurobiology today. Previous research on the brains of primates has shown that neurons in primary and secondary cortices provide poor representation of visual consciousness. In contrast, the neurons in the temporal lobe seem to reliably reflect the actual conscious perception of a visual stimulus. These findings indicated that not all parts of the brain are responsible for the content of conscious awareness. Nevertheless, the question whether only one of the brain's areas is responsible for the content of perception or whether more regions are involved in the process has so far remained unanswered. The Max Planck scientists in Tübingen, led by Nikos Logothetis, have now addressed this issue using electrophysiological methods to monitor the neural activity in the lateral prefrontal cortex of macaque monkeys during ambiguous visual stimulation. The visual stimuli used allow for multiple perceptual interpretations, even though the actual input remained the same. In doing so, Panagiotaropoulos and his team were able to show that the electrical activity monitored in the lateral prefrontal cortex correlates with what the macaque monkeys actually perceive. They thus concluded that visual awareness is not only reliably reflected in the temporal lobe, but also in the lateral prefrontal cortex of primates. The results depict that the neuronal correlates of consciousness are embedded in this area, which has a direct connection to premotor and motor areas of the brain, and is therefore able to directly affect motor output. These findings support the frontal lobe hypothesis of conscious visual perception established in 1995 by the researchers Crick, the co-discoverer of the structure of the DNA molecule, and Cook, that awareness is related to neural activity with direct access to the planning stages of the brain. The results support this theory insofar as they show that the lateral prefrontal cortex is involved in the process of visual awareness. However, the fact that neural activity in two different cortical areas reflects conscious perception shows that the decision which sensory input reaches our awareness is most likely not made in a unique cortical area but, rather, that a global network of neurons from different areas of the brain is responsible for it. Our results therefore broaden the hypothesis and create new questions regarding the cortical mechanisms of visual awareness, Panagiotaropoulos explains. In the near future, the group is going to record the electrical activity in both regions simultaneously. By this they will try to find out which of the two areas is activated first and draw conclusions on how the two areas interact with each other during conscious perception. This may lead to a better understanding of why only certain things reach our awareness and others remain suppressed. Source: Max Planck Institute. EEG biofeedback treatment. EEG biofeedback treatment. EEG biofeedback treatment, also known as electromyograph, is the process of identifying, measuring, and manipulating many physiological functions. Some of the processes that can be controlled include brainwaves, muscle tone, skin conductance, heart rate, and pain perception. The goal of Crosby's EEG biofeedback treatment is to improve health, performance, and the physiological changes which often occur in conjunction with changes to thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Eventually, these changes may be maintained without the use of extra equipment or medication. EEG biofeedback monitors physiological reactions while neurofeedback monitor neurological reactions. Crosby utilizes EEG biofeedback treatment to accurately diagnose your condition and its root causes and to treat addictions and any co-occurring emotional disorders. Biofeedback performs several functions in your recovery: part of your diagnostic testing, part of your individualized therapy, a benchmark to measure the effectiveness of your ongoing therapy for your treatment team to make adjustments to your therapy to display your results on the video monitors so that you can see your healing and recovery. How does EEG biofeedback treatment work? EEG biofeedback treatment is completely non-invasive and painless. Electrical sensors are placed on the patient to measure activity. The electrical activity is sent via the sensors to the wires which connect to the EEG biofeedback device. These measurements are displayed on a video monitor. You can actually see your physical reactions and watch as our therapy addresses areas your reaction. EEG biofeedback treatment helps identify the root cause to psychological disorders, drug addictions, or both. EEG biofeedback treatment with successful EEG biofeedback training, prescribed medications that target brain function may no longer be needed. During EEG biofeedback treatment, medication dosages may be lowered as you are able to control and regulate your physical reactions, reducing the need for pharmacological intervention. This decrease in medications is particularly striking when the medications play a supportive role, as is often the case for the more severe disorders. Electroencephalography. Epileptic spike and wave discharges monitored with EEG. Electroencephalography, EEG, is the recording of electrical activity along the scalp produced by the firing of neurons within the brain. In clinical contexts, EEG refers to the recording of the brain's spontaneous electrical activity over a short period of time, usually 20 to 40 minutes, as recorded from multiple electrodes placed on the scalp. In neurology, the main diagnostic application of EEG is in the case of epilepsy, as epileptic activity can create clear abnormalities on a standard EEG study. A secondary clinical use of EEG is in the diagnosis of coma and encephalopathies. EEG used to be a first-line method for the diagnosis of tumors, stroke, and other focal brain disorders, but this use has decreased with the advent of anatomical imaging techniques such as MRI and CT. Derivatives of the EEG technique include evoked potentials, EP, which involves averaging the EEG activity time locked to the presentation of a stimulus of some sort, visual, somatosensory, or auditory. Event-related potentials refer to averaged EEG responses that are time-locked to more complex processing of stimuli. This technique is used in cognitive science, cognitive psychology, and psychophysiological research. Source of EEG activity. The electrical activity of the brain can be described in spatial scales, from the currents within a single dendritic spine to the relatively gross potentials that the EEG records from the scalp, much the same way that the economics can be studied from the level of a single individual's personal finances to the macroeconomics of nations. Neurons, or nerve cells, are electrically active cells which are primarily responsible for carrying out the brain's functions. Neurons create action potentials, which are discrete electrical signals that travel down axons and cause the release of chemical neurotransmitters at the synapse, which is an area of near contact between two neurons. This neurotransmitter then fits into a receptor in the dendrite or body of the neuron that is on the other side of the synapse, the postsynaptic neuron. The neurotransmitter, when combined with the receptor, typically causes an electrical current within dendrite or body of the postsynaptic neuron. Thousands of postsynaptic currents from a single neuron's dendrites and body then sum up to cause the neuron to generate an action potential, or not. This neuron then synapses on other neurons, and so on. It is generally accepted that the activity measured by EEG is electrical potentials created by the postsynaptic currents, rather than by action potentials. More specifically, the scalp electrical potentials that produce EEG are due to the extracellular ionic currents caused by dendritic electrical activity, whereas the fields producing magnetoencephalographic signals are associated with intracellular ionic currents. Although postsynaptic potentials generate the EEG signal, it is not possible for a scalp EEG to assess the activity within a single dendrite or neuron. Rather, a surface EEG reading is the summation of the synchronous activity of thousands or millions of neurons that have similar spatial orientation, radial to the scalp. Currents that are tangential to the scalp are not picked up by the EEG. The EEG therefore benefits from the parallel, radial arrangement of apical dendrites in the cortex. Because voltage fields fall off with the fourth power of the radius, activity from deep sources is more difficult to detect than currents near the skull. Citation needed. Scalp EEG activity shows oscillations at a variety of frequencies. Several of these oscillations have characteristic frequency ranges, spatial distributions, and are associated with different states of brain functioning, example waking and the various sleep stages. These oscillations represent synchronized activity over a network of neurons. The neuronal networks underlying some of these oscillations are understood, example the thalamocortical resonance underlying sleep spindles, while many others are not, example the system that generates the posterior basic rhythm. Clinical use. A routine clinical EEG recording typically lasts 20 to 40 minutes, plus preparation time, and usually involves recording from 21 scalp electrodes. Routine EEG is typically used in the following clinical circumstances: to distinguish epileptic seizures from other types of spells, such as psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, syncope, fainting, subcortical movement disorders and migraine variants. To differentiate organic encephalopathy or delirium from primary psychiatric syndromes such as catatonia. To serve as an adjunct test of brain death. To prognosticate, in certain instances, in patients with coma. At times, a routine EEG is not sufficient, particularly when it is necessary to record a patient while he/she is having a seizure. In this case, the patient may be admitted to the hospital for days or even weeks, while EEG is constantly being recorded, along with time-synchronized video and audio recording. A recording of an actual seizure, i.e., an ictal recording, rather than an interictal recording of a possibly epileptic patient at some period between seizures, can give significantly better information about whether or not a spell is an epileptic seizure and the focus in the brain from which the seizure activity emanates. Epilepsy monitoring is typically done to distinguish epileptic seizures from other types of spells, such as psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, syncope, fainting, subcortical movement disorders and migraine variants. To characterize seizures for the purposes of treatment. To localize the region of brain from which a seizure originates for workup of possible seizure surgery. Additionally, EEG may be used to monitor certain procedures, to monitor the depth of anesthesia as an indirect indicator of cerebral perfusion in carotid endarterectomy. To monitor a mobarbital effect during the WADA test. EEG can also be used in intensive care units for brain function monitoring, to monitor for non-convulsive seizures/non-convulsive status epilepticus. To monitor the effect of sedative/anesthesia in patients in medically induced coma, for treatment of refractory seizures or increased intracranial pressure, to monitor for secondary brain damage in conditions such as subarachnoid hemorrhage, currently a research method. If a patient with epilepsy is being considered for resective surgery, it is often necessary to localize the focus, source, of the epileptic brain activity with a resolution greater than what is provided by scalp EEG. This is because the cerebrospinal fluid, skull, and scalp smear the electrical potentials recorded by scalp EEG. In these cases, neurosurgeons typically implant strips and grids of electrodes, or penetrating depth electrodes, under the dura mater, through either a craniotomy or a burr hole. The recording of these signals is referred to as electrocorticography, ECOG, subdural EEG, SDEEG, or intracranial EEG, ICEEG, all terms for the same thing. The signal recorded from ECOG is on a different scale of activity than the brain activity recorded from scalp EEG. Low voltage, high frequency components that cannot be seen easily, or at all, in scalp EEG can be seen clearly in ECOG. Further, smaller electrodes, which cover a smaller parcel of brain surface, allow even lower voltage, faster components of brain activity to be seen. Some clinical sites record from penetrating microelectrodes. Research use an early EEG recording, obtained by Hansberger in 1924. The upper tracing is EEG, and the lower is a 10 Hz timing signal. EEG, and its derivative, ERPs, are used extensively in neuroscience, cognitive science, cognitive psychology, and psychophysiological research. Many techniques used in research contexts are not standardized sufficiently to be used in the clinical context. A different method to study brain function is functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. Some benefits of EEG compared to fMRI include: hardware costs are significantly lower for EEG sensors versus an fMRI machine. EEG sensors can be deployed into a wider variety of environments than a bulky, immobile fMRI machine. EEG enables higher temporal resolution, on the order of milliseconds, rather than seconds. EEG is relatively tolerant of subject movement versus an fMRI, where the subject must remain completely still. EEG is silent, which allows for better study of the responses to auditory stimuli. EEG does not cause claustrophobia. Limitations of EEG as compared with fMRI include: significantly less spatial resolution, need to apply electrodes to the scalp, which may bother people with severe tactile sensitivities. Example: some individuals with autism. ERP studies require relatively simple paradigms, compared with block design fMRI studies. EEG recordings have successfully obtained simultaneously with fMRI scans, though successful simultaneous recording requires that several technical issues be overcome, such as the presence of ballistocardiographic artifact, MRI pulse artifact, and the induction of electrical currents in EEG wires that move within the strong magnetic fields of the MRI. EEG also has some characteristics that compare favorably with behavioral testing. EEG can detect covert processing, i.e., that which does not require a response. EEG can be used in subjects who are incapable of making a motor response. Some ERP components can be detected even when the subject is not attending to the stimuli. As compared with other reaction time paradigms, ERPs can elucidate stages of processing, rather than just the final end result. Method: computer electroencephalograph neurovisor BMM40. In conventional scalp EEG, the recording is obtained by placing electrodes on the scalp with a conductive gel or paste, usually after preparing the scalp area by light abrasion to reduce impedance due to dead skin cells. Many systems typically use electrodes, each of which is attached to an individual wire. Some systems use caps or nets into which electrodes are embedded. This is particularly common when high-density arrays of electrodes are needed. Electrode locations and names are specified by the International 10-20 system for most clinical and research applications, except when high-density arrays are used. This system ensures that the naming of electrodes is consistent across laboratories. In most clinical applications, 19 recording electrodes, plus ground and system reference, are used. A smaller number of electrodes are typically used when recording EEG from neonates. Additional electrodes can be added to the standard setup when a clinical or research application demands increased spatial resolution for a particular area of the brain. High-density arrays, typically via cap or net, can contain up to 256 electrodes more or less evenly spaced around the scalp. Each electrode is connected to one input of a differential amplifier, one amplifier per pair of electrodes. A common system reference electrode is connected to the other input of each differential amplifier. These amplifiers amplify the voltage between the active electrode and the reference, typically 1000 to 100,000 times, or 60 to 100 dB of voltage gain. In analog EEG, the signal is then filtered, next paragraph, and the EEG signal is output as the deflection of pens as paper passes underneath. Most EEG systems these days, however, are digital, and the amplified signal is digitized via an analog-to-digital converter, after being passed through an anti-aliasing filter. Analog-to-digital sampling typically occurs at 256 to 512 Hz in clinical scalp EEG. Sampling rates of up to 20 kHz are used in some research applications. During the recording, a series of activation procedures may be used. These procedures may induce normal or abnormal EEG activity that might not otherwise be seen. These procedures include hyperventilation, photic stimulation, with a strobe light, eye closure, mental activity, sleep and sleep deprivation. During inpatient epilepsy monitoring, a patient's typical seizure medications may be withdrawn. The digital EEG signal is stored electronically and can be filtered for display. Typical settings for the high-pass filter and a low-pass filter are 0.5 to 1 Hz and 35 to 70 Hz, respectively. The high-pass filter typically filters out slow artifact, such as electrogalvanic signals and movement artifact, whereas the low-pass filter filters out high-frequency artifacts, such as electromyographic signals. An additional notch filter is typically used to remove artifact caused by electrical power lines, 60 Hz in the United States and 50 Hz in many other countries. As part of an evaluation for epilepsy surgery, it may be necessary to insert electrodes near the surface of the brain, under the surface of the dura mater. This is accomplished via burr-hole or craniotomy. This is referred to variously as electrocorticography, ECG, intracranial EEG, IEEG, or subdural EEG, SDEEG. Depth electrodes may also be placed into brain structures, such as the amygdala or hippocampus, structures which are common epileptic foci and may not be seen clearly by scalp EEG. The electrocorticographic signal is processed in the same manner as digital scalp EEG, above, with a couple of caveats. ECG is typically recorded at higher sampling rates than scalp EEG because of the requirements of Nyquist theorem. The subdural signal is composed of a higher predominance of higher frequency components. Also, many of the artifacts which affect scalp EEG do not impact ECG, and therefore display filtering is often not needed. A typical adult human EEG signal is about 10 V to 100 V in amplitude when measured from the scalp and is about 10 to 20 MV when measured from subdural electrodes. Since an EEG voltage signal represents a difference between the voltages at two electrodes, the display of the EEG for the reading encephalographer may be set up in one of several ways. The representation of the EEG channels is referred to as a montage. Bipolar montage: each channel, i.e., waveform, represents the difference between two adjacent electrodes. The entire montage consists of a series of these channels. For example, the channel FP1-F3 represents the difference in voltage between the FP1 electrode and the F3 electrode. The next channel in the montage, F3-C3, represents the voltage difference between F3 and C3, and so on through the entire array of electrodes. Referential montage: each channel represents the difference between a certain electrode and a designated reference electrode. There is no standard position at which this reference is always placed. It is, however, at a different position than the recording electrodes. Midline positions are often used because they do not amplify the signal in one hemisphere versus the other. Another popular reference is linked ears, which is a physical or mathematical average of electrodes attached to both earlobes or mastoids. Average reference montage: the outputs of all of the amplifiers are summed and averaged, and this averaged signal is used as the common reference for each channel. Laplacian montage: each channel represents the difference between an electrode and a weighted average of the surrounding electrodes. When analog, paper, EEGs are used, the technologist switches between montages during the recording in order to highlight or better characterize certain features of the EEG. With digital EEG, all signals are typically digitized and stored in a particular, usually referential, montage. Since any montage can be constructed mathematically from any other, The EEG can be viewed by the electroencephalographer in any display montage that is desired. The EEG is read by a neurologist, optimally one who has specific training in the interpretation of EEGs. This is done by visual inspection of the waveforms. The use of computer signal processing of the EEG, so-called quantitative EEG, is somewhat controversial when used for clinical purposes, although there are many research uses. Limitations: EEG has several limitations. Most important is its poor spatial resolution. EEG is most sensitive to a particular set of postsynaptic potentials, those which are generated in superficial layers of the cortex, on the crests of gyri directly abutting the skull and radial to the skull. Dendrites which are deeper in the cortex, inside sulci, in midline or deep structures, such as the cingulate gyrus or hippocampus, or producing currents which are tangential to the skull, have far less contribution to the EEG signal. The meninges, cerebrospinal fluid, and skull smear the EEG signal, obscuring its intracranial source. It is mathematically impossible to reconstruct a unique intracranial current source for a given EEG signal, as some currents produce potentials that cancel each other out. This is referred to as the inverse problem. However, much work has been done to produce remarkably good estimates of, at least, a localized electric dipole that represents the recorded currents. EEG vs fMRI and PET. EEG has several strong sides as a tool of exploring brain activity. For example, its time resolution is very high, on the level of a single millisecond. Other methods of looking at brain activity, such as PET and fMRI, have time resolution between seconds and minutes. EEG measures the brain's electrical activity directly, while other methods record changes in blood flow, example SPECT, fMRI, or metabolic activity, example PET, which are indirect markers of brain electrical activity. EEG can be used simultaneously with fMRI so that high temporal resolution data can be recorded at the same time as high spatial resolution data. However, since the data derived from each occurs over a different time course, the data sets do not necessarily represent the exact same brain activity. There are technical difficulties associated with combining these two modalities, including the need to remove the MRI gradient artifact present during MRI acquisition and the ballistocardiographic artifact, resulting from the pulsatile motion of blood and tissue, from the EEG. Furthermore, currents can be induced in moving EEG electrode wires due to the magnetic field of the MRI. EEG can be recorded at the same time as MEG so that data from these complementary high time resolution techniques can be combined. Normal activity: 1 second of EEG signal. The EEG is typically described in terms of 1. Rhythmic activity and 2. Transients. The rhythmic activity is divided into bands by frequency. To some degree, these frequency bands are a matter of nomenclature, i.e., any rhythmic activity between 8 to 12 Hz can be described as alpha, but these designations arose because rhythmic activity within a certain frequency range was noted to have a certain distribution over the scalp or a certain biological significance. Most of the cerebral signal observed in the scalp EEG falls in the range of 1 to 20 Hz. Activity below or above this range is likely to be artifactual, under standard clinical recording techniques. Comparison table: comparison of EEG bands: type: frequency, Hertz, delta up to 3 location frontally in adults, posteriorly in children, high amplitude waves normally adult, slow wave sleep, pathologically subcortical lesions, diffuse lesions, metabolic encephalopathy, hydrocephalus, deep midline lesions. In babies theta 4 to 7 Hz, young children focal subcortical lesions, drowsiness or arousal in older children and adults, metabolic encephalopathy, alpha 8 to 12 Hz, beta posterior regions of head, both sides, higher in amplitude on dominant side. Central sites, C3 C4, at rest. Both sides, symmetrical distribution, 12 to 30 Hz, most evident frontally, low amplitude waves, GAM 34 to 100 plus A, deep midline disorders, some instances of hydrocephalus, coma, benzodiazepines, idling, relaxed / reflecting, closing the eyes, alert / working, active, busy, or anxious thinking, active concentration, certain cognitive or motor functions, wave patterns, delta waves. Delta is the frequency range up to 3 Hz. It tends to be the highest in amplitude and the slowest waves. It is seen normally in adults in slow wave sleep. It is also seen normally in babies. It may occur focally with subcortical lesions and in general distribution with diffuse lesions, metabolic encephalopathy, hydrocephalus or deep midline lesions. It is usually most prominent frontally in adults, e.g. FIRDA, frontal intermittent rhythmic delta, and posteriorly in children, e.g. WARDA, occipital intermittent rhythmic delta. Theta waves. Theta is the frequency range from 4 Hz to 7 Hz. Theta is seen normally in young children. It may be seen in drowsiness or arousal in older children and adults. It can also be seen in meditation. Citation needed. Excess theta for age represents abnormal activity. It can be seen as a focal disturbance in focal subcortical lesions. It can be seen in generalized distribution in diffuse disorder or metabolic encephalopathy or deep midline disorders or some instances of hydrocephalus. On the contrary, this range has been associated with reports of relaxed, meditative, and creative states. Alpha waves. Alpha is the frequency range from 8 Hz to 12 Hz. Hans Berger named the first rhythmic EEG activity he saw, the alpha wave. This is activity in the 8 to 12 Hz range seen in the posterior regions of the head on both sides, being higher in amplitude on the dominant side. It is brought out by closing the eyes and by relaxation. It was noted to attenuate with eye opening or mental exertion. This activity is now referred to as posterior basic rhythm, the posterior dominant rhythm or the posterior alpha rhythm. The posterior basic rhythm is actually slower than 8 Hz in young children, therefore technically in the theta range. In addition to the posterior basic rhythm, there are two other normal alpha rhythms that are typically discussed, the mu rhythm and a temporal third rhythm. Alpha can be abnormal, for example, an EEG that has diffuse alpha occurring in coma and is not responsive to external stimuli is referred to as alpha coma. Sensoromotor rhythm aka mu rhythm. Mu rhythm is alpha range activity that is seen over the sensoromotor cortex. It characteristically attenuates with movement of the contralateral arm, or mental imagery of movement of the contralateral arm. Beta waves. Beta is the frequency range from 12 Hz to about 30 Hz. It is seen usually on both sides in symmetrical distribution and is most evident frontally. Low amplitude beta with multiple and varying frequencies is often associated with active, busy, or anxious thinking and active concentration. Rhythmic beta with a dominant set of frequencies is associated with various pathologies and drug effects, especially benzodiazepines. Activity over about 25 Hz seen in the scalp EEG is rarely cerebral, i.e., it is most often artifactual. It may be absent or reduced in areas of cortical damage. It is the dominant rhythm in patients who are alert or anxious or who have their eyes open. Gamma waves. Gamma is the frequency range approximately 26 to 100 Hz. Because of the filtering properties of the skull and scalp, gamma rhythms can only be recorded from electrocorticography or possibly with magnetoencephalography. Gamma rhythms are thought to represent binding of different populations of neurons together into a network for the purpose of carrying out a certain cognitive or motor function. Ultra-slow or near DC activity is recorded using DC amplifiers in some research contexts. It is not typically recorded in a clinical context because the signal at these frequencies is susceptible to a number of artifacts. Some features of the EEG are transient rather than rhythmic. Spikes and sharp waves may represent seizure activity or interictal activity in individuals with epilepsy or a predisposition toward epilepsy. Other transient features are normal, vertex waves and sleep spindles are transient events which are seen in normal sleep. It should also be noted that there are types of activity which are statistically uncommon but are not associated with dysfunction or disease. These are often referred to as normal variants. The mu rhythm is an example of a normal variant. The normal EEG varies by age. The neonatal EEG is quite different from the adult EEG. The EEG in childhood generally has slower frequency oscillations than the adult EEG. The normal EEG also varies depending on state. The EEG is used along with other measurements, EOG, EMG, to define sleep stages in polysomnography. Stage I sleep, equivalent to drowsiness in some systems, appears on the EEG as drop out of the posterior basic rhythm. There can be an increase in theta frequencies. Santamaria and Chiappa catalogued a number of the variety of patterns associated with drowsiness. Stage 2 sleep is characterized by sleep spindles' transient runs of rhythmic activity in the 12 to 14 Hz range, sometimes referred to as the sigma band, that have a frontal central maximum. Most of the activity in stage 2 is in the 3 to 6 Hz range. Stage 3 and 4 sleep are defined by the presence of delta frequencies and are often referred to collectively as slow-wave sleep. Stages I-4 comprise non-REM, or NREM, sleep. The EEG in REM, rapid eye movement, sleep appears somewhat similar to the awake EEG. EEG under general anesthesia depends on the type of anesthetic employed. With halogenated anesthetics, such as halothane, or intravenous agents, such as propofol, a rapid, alpha or low beta, non-reactive EEG pattern is seen over most of the scalp, especially anteriorly. In some older terminology this was known as a WAR, widespread anterior rapid, pattern, contrasted with a WACE, widespread slow, pattern associated with high doses of opiates. Anesthetic effects on EEG signals are beginning to be understood at the level of drug actions on different kinds of synapses and the circuits that allow synchronized neuronal activity. See http://www.stanford.edu/group/McIver-Lab. Artifacts: biological artifacts, electrical signals detected along the scalp by an EEG, but that originate from non-cerebral origin are called artifacts. EEG data is almost always contaminated by such artifacts. The amplitude of artifacts can be quite large relative to the size of amplitude of the cortical signals of interest. This is one of the reasons why it takes considerable experience to correctly interpret EEGs clinically. Some of the most common types of biological artifacts include eye-induced artifacts, includes eye blinks and eye movements, EKG, cardiac artifacts, EMG, muscle activation, induced artifacts, glossokinetic artifacts. Eye-induced artifacts are caused by the potential difference between the cornea and retina, which is quite large compared to cerebral potentials. When the eye is completely still, this does not affect EEG. But there are nearly always small or large reflexive eye movements, which generates a potential which is picked up in the frontopolar and frontal leads. Involuntary eye movements, known as SACC-aids, are caused by ocular muscles, which also generate electromyographic potentials. Purposeful or reflexive eye blinking also generates electromyographic potentials, but more importantly there is reflexive movement of the eyeball during blinking which gives a characteristic artifactual appearance of the EEG, see Bell's phenomenon. Eyelid fluttering artifacts of a characteristic type were previously called kappa rhythm, or kappa waves. It is usually seen in the prefrontal leads, that is, just over the eyes. Sometimes they are seen with mental activity. They are usually in the theta, 4 to 7 Hz, or alpha, 8 to 13 Hz, range. They were named because they were believed to originate from the brain. Later study revealed they were generated by rapid fluttering of the eyelids, sometimes so minute that it was difficult to see. They are in fact noise in the EEG reading, and should not technically be called a rhythm or wave. Therefore, current usage in electroencephalography refers to the phenomenon as an eyelid fluttering artifact, rather than a kappa rhythm, or wave. Some of these artifacts are useful. Eye movements are very important in polysomnography, and is also useful in conventional EEG for assessing possible changes in alertness, drowsiness, or sleep. EKG artifacts are quite common and can be mistaken for spike activity. Because of this, modern EEG acquisition commonly includes a one-channel EKG from the extremities. This also allows the EEG to identify cardiac arrhythmias that are an important differential diagnosis to syncope or other episodic/attack disorders. Glossokinetic artifacts are caused by the potential difference between the base and the tip of the tongue. Minor tongue movements can contaminate the EEG, especially in Parkinsonian and tremor disorders. Environmental artifacts. In addition to artifacts generated by the body, many artifacts originate from outside the body. Movement by the patient, or even just settling of the electrodes, may cause electrode pops, spikes originating from a momentary change in the impedance of a given electrode. Poor grounding of the EEG electrodes can cause significant 50 or 60 Hz artifact, depending on the local power system's frequency. A third source of possible interference can be the presence of an foredrip. Such devices can cause rhythmic, fast, low-voltage bursts, which may be confused for spikes. Artifact correction. Recently, source decomposition techniques have been used to correct or remove EEG contaminants. These techniques attempt to unmix the EEG signals into some number of underlying components. There are many source separation algorithms, often assuming various behaviors or natures of EEG. Regardless, the principle behind any particular method usually allow remixing only those components that would result in clean EEG by nullifying, zeroing, the weight of unwanted components. Abnormal activity. Abnormal activity can broadly be separated into epileptiform and non-epileptiform activity. It can also be separated into focal or diffuse. Focal epileptiform discharges represent fast, synchronous potentials in a large number of neurons in a somewhat discrete area of the brain. These can occur as interictal activity between seizures and represent an area of cortical irritability that may be predisposed to producing epileptic seizures. Interictal discharges are not wholly reliable for determining whether a patient has epilepsy nor where his/her seizure might originate. See focal epilepsy. Generalized epileptiform discharges often have an anterior maximum, but these are seen synchronously throughout the entire brain. They are strongly suggestive of a generalized epilepsy. Focal non-epileptiform abnormal activity may occur over areas of the brain where there is focal damage of the cortex or white matter. It often consists of an increase in slow-frequency rhythms and/or a loss of normal higher-frequency rhythms. It may also appear as focal or unilateral decrease in amplitude of the EEG signal. Diffuse non-epileptiform abnormal activity may manifest as diffuse abnormally slow rhythms or bilateral slowing of normal rhythms, such as the PBR. History. A timeline of the history of EEG is given by Swartz. 3. Richard Cotton, 1842 to 1926, a physician practicing in Liverpool, presented his findings about electrical phenomena of the exposed cerebral hemispheres of rabbits and monkeys in the British Medical Journal in 1875. In 1890, Beck published an investigation of spontaneous electrical activity of the brain of rabbits and dogs which included rhythmic oscillations altered by light. In 1912, Russian physiologist, Vladimir Vladimirovich Pravdiknemensky published the first EEG and the evoked potential of the mammalian dog. 4. In 1914, Cybulski and Jelenska-Massiazina photographed EEG recordings of experimentally induced seizures. German physiologist and psychiatrist Hans Berger, 1873 to 1941, began his studies of the human EEG in 1920. He gave the device its name and is sometimes credited with inventing the EEG, though others had performed similar experiments. His work was later expanded by Edgar Douglas Adrian. In 1934, Fisher and Lowenbach first demonstrated epileptiform spikes. In 1935 Gibbs, Davis, and Lennox described interictal spike waves and the 3-cycle/S pattern of clinical absence seizures, which began the field of clinical electroencephalography. Subsequently, in 1936 Gibbs and Jasper reported the interictal spike as the focal signature of epilepsy. The same year, the first EEG laboratory opened at Massachusetts General Hospital. Franklin Offner, 1911 to 1999, professor of biophysics at Northwestern University, developed a prototype of the EEG which incorporated a piezoelectric ink writer called a crystograph. The whole device was typically known as the Offner dynograph. In 1947, the American EEG Society was founded and the first International EEG Congress was held. In 1953 Aserinsky and Kleitmian describe REM sleep. In the 1950s, William Gray Walter developed an adjunct to EEG called EEG topography, which allowed for the mapping of electrical activity across the surface of the brain. This enjoyed a brief period of popularity in the 1980s and seemed especially promising for psychiatry. It was never accepted by neurologists and remains primarily a research tool. Various uses. The EEG has been used for many purposes besides the conventional uses of clinical diagnosis and conventional cognitive neuroscience. Neurofeedback remains an important extension, and in its most advanced form is also attempted as the basis of brain-computer interfaces. There are many commercial products substantially based on the EEG. EEGs have been used as evidence in trials in the Indian state of Maharashtra. 5 Games. In March 24, 2007, a U.S. company called Emotive launched a pointing device for video games based on electroencephalography. 6 Announced at the end of 2008/start of 2009 were 2 games-based monitoring theta waves using technology by a company called Neuroski. Mindflex by Matel 7 and Force Trainer by Uncle Milton. 8 Images. Portable recording. Girl wearing, person wearing device for EEG. Electrodes for EEG. EEG references. EEG used during a music performance in which bathers from around the world were networked together as part of a collective musical performance, using their brainwaves to control sound, lighting, and the bath environment. 1. H. Aurelian, I. O'Gerty, J. H. Arseth, B. Carlson, H. Skiadsfall, N. E. Gillis, March 2004. EEG background activity described by a large computerized database. Clinical Neurophysiology 115, 3665-673 doi 10.1016/j.clint.2003.10.019. 2. Epstein, Charles M., 1983. Introduction to EEG and Evoked Potentials. J. B. Lippincotko. ISBN 0-397-50598-1. 3. Swartz, B. E., 1998. Timeline of the History of EEG and Associated Fields, PDF. Electroencephalography and Clinical Neurophysiology 106, 173-176. doi 10.1016/S00134694, 97, 00113-2. http://www.science-ob_ob=mem_g_image key B6SYX4FV4S6H-11-CDI=4846 #10-org=browse &_origcovered8 $2 sk $998939997 6 and WCHP DGLBVZZZSKWB and MD5 47 FB7 E51 80677971 FBA 415 B96 ob7 and IE=starticle.pdf. 4. Pravdiknemensky VV ein Versuch der Registrierung der elektrischen Gehirnerscheinungen, in German. ZBL Physiol 27, 951-960, 1913. 5. This brain test maps the truth. July 21, 2008, 0348 HRSIST, Nidisha Natu TNN 6. Reporter, Don Clark Video Mind Control Device. 2007 http://video.msn.com/v/fv/msnbc/fv.htm ? F equals 00 and G equals 09E9 F85663 F340 CD83E6 EB6 F2910 A31C and P equals and T equals M5 and RF equals http://www.msnbc.msn.com/ID/177407449/ and FG equals. Retrieved on March 25, 2007. References: Budnick, Stephen M. Neurofeedback in Adolescents and Adults with Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Journal of Clinical Psychology, May 2005. Volume 61 Issue 5, p. 621-625 Evans, J.R., and Abarbnanel, A. An Introduction to Quantitative EEG and Neurofeedback. Academic Press, San Diego, 1999. Hammond, Corridon D. Neurofeedback Treatment of Depression and Anxiety. Journal of Adult Development, Vol 12, NOS 2/3, August 2005. Kaiser, David A. Basic Principles of Quantitative EEG. Journal of Adult Development, Volume 12, NOS 2/3, August 2005. Levesque, Johanna, and Mario Beauregard. Effect of Neurofeedback Training on the Neural Substrates of Selective Attention in Children with Attention Deficit/Hyperactivity Disorder, a Functional Magnetic Resonance Imaging Study. Neuroscience Letters, 394, 216-221. Master Pasquale, Frank, and Healy, Catherine N. Neurofeedback in Psychological Practice. Professional Psychology, Research and Practice. December 2003, Volume 34 Issue 6, p. 652-656 Trudeau, David L. EEG Biofeedback for Addictive Disorders, The State of the Art in 2004. Journal of Adult Development, Vol 12, NOS 2/3, August 2005. Vernon, D., 2005. Can Neurofeedback Training Enhance Performance? An Evaluation of the Evidence with Implications for Future Research. Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback, 34, 347-364. 1 Kamiya, J., 1971. Operant Control of the EEG Algorithm and Some of Its Reported Effects on Consciousness. Biofeedback and Self-Control, an Aldine Reader on the Regulation of Bodily Processes and Consciousness. 2 Hart, J.V., Kamiya, J., 1978. Anxiety Change Through Electroencephalographic Alpha Feedback Seen Only in High Anxiety Subjects. Science 201, 4350-79-81 doi 10.1126/science.663641. PMID 663641. 3 Paskewitz, D.A., Orn, M.T., 1973. Visual Effects on Alpha Feedback Training. Science 181, 4097 360-363 doi 10.1126/science.181.4097.360. PMID 471-9909. 4 Hart, J.V., Kamiya, J., 1976. Conflicting Results in EEG Alpha Feedback Studies. Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback 163-75 http://www.springerlink.com/index/q626417756786664.pdf. Retrieved on December 5, 2007. 5 Sturman, M.B., Clemente, C.D., 1962. 4 Brain Inhibitory Mechanisms, Cortical Synchronization Induced by Basal Forebrain Stimulation. EXP Neural 6, 91-102. doi 10.1016/0014-4886, 62, 90080-8. http://www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/site/entrées?? DB equals PubMed and UID equals 1391697 and CMD equals show detail view and indexed equals Google. Retrieved on 2007-1205. 6 Sturman, M.B., Fryer, L., 1972. Suppression of Seizures in an Epileptic Following Sensoromotor EEG Feedback Training. Electroencephalographin Neurophysiol 33, 189-95 doi 10.1016/0013-4694, 72, 90028-4 http://www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/site/entrées question mark db equals pubmed and uid equals 4113278 and cmd equals show detail view and indexed equals Google. Retrieved on 2007 to 1205. 7 A.B. Sturman, M.B., 2000. Basic Concepts and Clinical Findings in the Treatment of Seizure Disorders with EEG Operant Conditioning. Clin Electroencephalograph 31, 145-55 http://www.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/site/entrées question mark db equals pubmed and uid equals 106383552 and cmd equals show detail view and indexed equals Google. Retrieved on 2007 to 1205. 8 Luber, J.F., Swartwood, M.O., Swartwood, J.N., O'Donnell, Ph., 1995. Evaluation of the effectiveness of EEG neurofeedback training for ADHD in a clinical setting as measured by changes in TOVA scores, behavioral ratings, and WISC-R performance. Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback 20, 183-99 http://www.springerlink.com/index/L22138851002N16W6.pdf retrieved on December 5, 2007. EEG Biofeedback, a promising new therapy for attention deficit disorder, learning disabilities, and mild traumatic brain injuries. EEG Biofeedback, neurofeedback, is a promising new therapy in the field of applied psychophysiology. This field studies the relationship between the mind and the body. Specifically, it involves teaching people effective ways to control body functions. For example, therapists use biofeedback to help people learn how to relax. However, EEG biofeedback is more inclusive, as it involves opening up new avenues for communication between your body and your brain. EEG biofeedback helps you to learn how to access and maintain different states of physiological arousal. In other words, it is education for your brain. EEG biofeedback is an ideal therapy as it is non-invasive with minimal side effects. This therapy involves placing one or more sensors on the scalp and one to each ear. These sensors are then connected to a device which depicts a graphical recording of the electrical activity of the brain, referred to as brain waves. From the EEG, the therapist helps the client to associate specific mental states with his/her brain waves. Feedback regarding brain activity is presented to the client via a video game in which the brightness and speed of a Pac-Man-like figure corresponds to a preset threshold. The therapist guides the client by telling him/her to make the video game work with his/her brain. As brain waves in the desirable frequency occur, the video game moves faster, or an alternative reward is given. However, if brain waves in the undesirable frequency occur, then the video game is hindered. Since EEG biofeedback training is a learning process, progress is gradual. For most conditions, initial improvements can be observed within 10 sessions. In the case of hyperactivity and attention deficit disorder, training usually is recommended for about 40 sessions and more sessions may be needed depending on the severity. Whereas, some symptoms related to head injury such as quality of sleep, fatigue, and chronic pain frequently improve in less than 20 sessions. EEG Spectrum website, 2000. Using EEG biofeedback as a therapy is becoming more acceptable due to the previous 20 years' worth of research in the field. EEG biofeedback has been investigated for use with a multitude of disorders such as epilepsy, hyperactivity, attention deficit disorder, and specific learning disabilities. Furthermore, it has been used clinically to help alleviate sleep disorders, and the motor, sensory, and cognitive deficits caused by minor closed head injury. However, the one characteristic which unites all of these disorders is that each typically causes abnormal brain waves on EEG. For example, in the instance of hyperactivity, the EEG shows inadequate beta activity related to arousal, Othmer and Othmer, 1989. Additionally, Luber, Bianchini, Calhoun, Lambert, Body, and Shavson, 1985, compared the brainwave patterns of learning disabled, LD, children with those of normal control children. They found that LD children displayed slower brainwave patterns than those without LD. Brain activity can be assessed by examining the graphical recording of the waves. Brain waves are classified as either alpha, beta, theta, or delta. When alpha waves are present, they indicate a calm and relaxed state of unfocused attention. Whereas, beta waves indicate an alert and awake state, such as when you focus on solving a problem. And, lastly, delta and theta waves are observed when you are daydreaming or drowsy. Linden, Habib, and Radojevic, 1993. By examining brain waves, the therapist can evaluate how your brain is functioning and then devise a treatment plan if abnormalities are present. EEG biofeedback for epilepsy. The field of EEG biofeedback began with Joe Kamiya and Elmer and Alice Green, who examined the connections between physiology and different states of consciousness. They found that clients could get into a deeply relaxed state in merely 1 to 2 sessions when trained to increase alpha waves. Sterman discovered that the 12 to 15 Hz region of the EEG was associated with specific rhythmic activity. He labeled this rhythm as the sensorimotor rhythm, SMR, due to its location at the sensoromotor cortex. Chase and Harper, 1971, Howe and Sterman, 1972, Sterman, 1977. Sensory motor rhythm has control over our body sensations and voluntary movements. Barry Sterman focused on the effects of EEG biofeedback on epilepsy. Sterman first worked with cats who had been exposed to toxic chemicals which usually induce seizure activity. In their study, Fairchild and Sterman, 1974, found that the cats who were operantly conditioned for SMR exhibited a higher threshold for seizure activity. Following this study with cats, Sterman and Fryer, 1972, then focused on whether SMR training could reduce seizures in humans. They published a report that SMR training did in fact reduce the seizures of one individual and also helped her sleep to improve. Sterman, McDonald, and Stone did further research and found that there was a 66% reduction in seizures for 4 epileptics. The protocol they followed was a combination of enhancing the SMR along with inhibition of excessive slow wave activity. Sterman, 1974. Additionally, Sterman reviewed the literature on treating epilepsy with EEG biofeedback and found that seizures were reduced in approximately 70% of the clients. Sterman, 1980. EEG biofeedback for hyperactivity. Using EEG biofeedback as a therapy for hyperactivity stemmed from the previous work with epilepsy. During EEG biofeedback training with epileptics, it was observed that symptoms of hyperactivity decreased. Luber and Baller, 1976a. This decrease is not that unexpected since hyperactivity can also be ascribed to insufficient motor inhibition. Luber and Schaus, 1976b, conducted the first study on the effectiveness of EEG biofeedback with hyperactivity. In this study, EEG training was observed to be more effective than the sole use of stimulant medications such as Ritalin. Then, Luber and Schaus completed a more comprehensive study of using EEG biofeedback for hyperactivity. They found that combining SMR training with drug therapy resulted in considerable improvements in behaviors which surpassed the effects of the drugs alone. Additionally, these changes in behavior were maintained with SMR training even after the withdrawal of medication. EEG biofeedback for attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is generally diagnosed in children who exhibit attention difficulties, impulsive behaviors, and extreme levels of hyperactivity. ADHD is not classified as a disease and no single diagnostic test exists. Rather, ADHD is generally viewed as an inherited disorder which may be intensified by minor traumatic brain injury, birth trauma, emotional and dietary factors, and inadequate sleep, Othmer and Othmer, 1992. Also, children with ADHD frequently exhibit a variety of physical problems such as headaches and immune system deficiencies, resulting in frequent illnesses. Additionally, anxiety, depression, oppositional defiant disorder, obsessive-compulsive behaviors may be present. The fact that ADHD is typically treated with stimulant medications such as Ritalin indicates that this disorder is characterized by insufficient arousal. EEG biofeedback is a way to train those areas of the brain involved in arousal and focus. And, it appears that once the brain learns how to regulate itself again that it does not revert back. EEG Spectrum website, 2000. The EEG of ADHD children differs from that of other children, in that, the brain waves tend to be of a larger amplitude. Specifically, the EEG shows excess theta activity along with lower amounts of beta activity, Luber, 1991. This pattern of brainwave activity usually indicates a sleep or daydreaming state, rather than an alert and focused state. The goal of EEG biofeedback training is to alter these abnormal brain waves by decreasing theta waves, while simultaneously increasing beta waves. In EEG biofeedback training, the therapist explains to the child the connection between what is happening in his/her cortex and what is recorded on the EEG. Then, the therapist helps the child to learn how to gain control over his/her brain waves. Joel Luber has extensively studied biofeedback with AD and ADHD children and adults. He devised the protocol for treating AD with neurofeedback in the 1970s, and his findings have been published in journals such as the Journal of Pediatrics and Pediatric Neurology. Luber states that between 80 to 90% of people with attention deficit disorder, AD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can benefit significantly from treatment. Robbins, 1997. Additionally, Othmer and Othmer, 1992, observed that significant change occurred when EEG biofeedback training was utilized. 15 children were tested with the Wechsler Intelligence Scale revised by an independent clinical psychologist. In the pre-test, the lowest scores were observed in those categories dealing with attention and sequence such as math, coding, information, and digit span. After EEG training, the scores in all of these categories improved. Additionally, an average increase in IQ was apparent, as much as 23 points. Othmer and Othmer explain this IQ increase as, "We assume that we are not making children smarter. We are simply making their intrinsic mental capability more accessible and usable to them." Othmer and Othmer, 1992. Several months after EEG training was completed, a follow-up with the parents of the children in the study was conducted. The parents noted an improvement in sleep and a reduction in headaches, as well as an increase in self-esteem. However, parents noted that problems in skills, math and reading, and behavior remained. From this study, it is evident that children with behavior problems may benefit from psychotherapy in addition to EEG biofeedback. Othmer and Othmer, 1992. Several researchers further corroborate that EEG biofeedback is an effective treatment for ADHD. In 2 studies, Michael Linden observed that EEG training had a positive impact on IQ scores, as well as behavior. Henry Cartazzo reported his findings at the annual meeting of the Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback. Like the Othmers, Cartazzo found that problems in math, coding, and digit span were remediated with EEG training. He also noted improvements in scores on a computerized test called TOVA. Othmer, Kaiser, and Othmer, 1995. The TOVA, Test of Variables of Attention, is a relatively new test which assesses attention deficits in adults and children. It is a continuous performance test which evaluates deficiencies. Although this test is only 22 minutes, data from it can serve as indicators of inattention, impulsivity, reaction time, and variability of reaction time. Othmer and Othmer, 1992. Since the T.O.V.A is computerized and computer scored, it removes the variable of human bias, therefore, it helps to increase the validity of EEG biofeedback. Othmer and Othmer studied the effects of EEG training on the TOVA, and they observed significant improvements in inattention, impulsivity, and variability of response time. Additionally, they found that one child in their study improved with EEG biofeedback even after he stopped taking Ritalin. This study is further supported by current research regarding EEG biofeedback with AD/ADHD. After EEG training, clinicians noted that children with AD/ADHD improved 60 to 80%, and that their medication could be reduced without regressing. Association for Applied Psychology and Biofeedback website, 2000. EEG biofeedback is not a cure for ADHD, but can help these children to improve their academic performance, social skills, and most of all their self-esteem. Othmer and Othmer, 1992a. Biofeedback helps ADHD children to realize that they can overcome their problems, inattention/hyperactivity, and are not at the mercy of this disorder. EEG biofeedback for learning disabilities, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 1993, nearly 4 million school-aged children exhibit learning disabilities. Studies indicate that children with learning disabilities also have increased rates of attention deficits, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. Hollowbrow and Berry conducted a study which investigated the relationship between hyperactivity and learning disabilities. In this study, teachers at 6 state primary schools and 1 private school rated their students on learning difficulties. The results from this study revealed that 26.5% of children rated as hyperactive also displayed learning difficulties, while only 5.2% of non-hyperactive children had learning problems. Hollowbrow and Berry, 1986. From these results, it appears that there is a connection between learning disorders and hyperactivity. Scientists originally thought that all learning disorders stemmed from a single neurological problem. But, research supported by the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, indicates that this theory is not accurate. Rather, many factors may contribute to learning disorders. For example, researchers at the NIMH are studying if environmental toxins can lead to the development of learning disorders. Since there are many potential causes for the development of learning disabilities, mental health professionals suggest that the family not concentrate on tracing the reason for the disability, but rather that they focus on finding an effective treatment. Unlike ADHD, which is frequently treated with a stimulant medication, a medical remedy for learning problems currently does not exist. However, recent evidence indicates that EEG biofeedback training can be helpful in specific learning challenges such as visual retention, articulation, and dyslexia. Othmer, 1999. Tanzi and Bruner, 1983, Joel and Judith Luber, 1984, conducted the first studies of EEG biofeedback as a treatment for both attention and learning problems. However, these early studies were not conclusive as to whether biofeedback training was effective. For example, in Luber's study, 5 of the 6 children in the study were also receiving academic support in addition to EEG training. And, in Tanzi and Bruner's study, they employed conventional biofeedback and EEG biofeedback training, so improvements could not unequivocally be attributed to EEG biofeedback. Then, Tanzi, 1985, published a study which removed the ambiguity of these previous studies. In his study of 4 learning disabled children, he observed that IQ scores improved after EEG training. In 1990, Tanzi conducted another study with 24 learning disabled children which further supported his theory that EEG biofeedback was effective. He noted that after EEG training there was an average improvement of 19 points on the Wechsler full-scale IQ test. The results from these studies suggest that EEG biofeedback has an impact on specific learning disabilities, while others appear to remain unaltered. It is clear that more research is necessary to differentiate between which learning problems improve with EEG biofeedback training and which are resistant to it. EEG biofeedback for minor traumatic brain injury. The consequences of minor traumatic brain injury are headaches, body pain, dizziness, depression, sleep problems, irritability, and even personality changes. Hoffman, et al., 1995. Traditionally, treatment of these symptoms was multidisciplinary and included education, family therapy, coping skills training, stress and pain management, vocational training, and individual psychotherapy. Howard, 1993. However, since the early 1980s, clinicians have been utilizing EEG biofeedback as a therapy for brain injuries. Psychologist Stephen Stockdale, director of the NeuroHealth Center in Colorado Springs, is one of these clinicians who has been successful in using EEG biofeedback to treat head injuries. Recently, Stockdale finished a 3-year study, not published yet, involving his patients' progress. He states that about 80% of people we work with learn to do the feedback. Of that 80%, there is a 75 to 90% reduction in symptoms. They clear up. Robbins, 1996. Examples of brain injuries which respond to EEG biofeedback are concussion, whiplash, infection of the central nervous system, chemical central nervous system injury, stroke, and cerebral palsy. Othmer and Othmer, 1989. Although currently there is no definitive answer to explain the mechanism behind EEG biofeedback, EEG biofeedback still remains a promising new treatment for minor traumatic head injuries. EEG Spectrum, a biofeedback treatment center. In 1985, Susan and Siegfried learned about EEG biofeedback as a possible treatment for their son, Brian's epilepsy. Years earlier, Professor M. Barry Sturman had developed the technique of treating epilepsy with EEG biofeedback at the UCLA School of Medicine and the Sepulveda VA Hospital. Brian was treated with EEG biofeedback and he improved immensely. Because Brian had made such progress, the Othmers believed that EEG biofeedback could be applied to a variety of disorders. Thus, in 1988, Susan and Siegfried Othmer along with Edward Dillingham founded the company, EEG Spectrum, with the mission to promote all aspects of EEG biofeedback such as clinical services, training of professionals, research and instrumentation development. EEG Spectrum website, 2000. Within the biofeedback community, EEG Spectrum is now recognized to be on the forefront of treating disorders ranging from attention deficits to traumatic brain injuries. EEG biofeedback for attention deficits is now offered at over 1,500 centers within the country and abroad. EEG Spectrum has offices nationwide and more than 60 affiliates in 20 countries. In EEG biofeedback, medicine, therapy, or learning. 1994, the Othmers state, biofeedback, at its best, is empowerment of the individual. We are simply the agency of that empowerment. For more information regarding EEG biofeedback including specific locations of EEG Spectrum treatment centers, please visit their website at http://www.eegspectrum.com. References: 1 Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback website, 2000. What kind of health problems can biofeedback help? 2 Chase, M.H., and Harper, R.M., 1971. Somatomotor and visceromotor correlates of operantly condition 12 to 14C/SEC sensoromotor cortical activity. Journal of Electroencephalography and Clinical Neurophysiology, 31, 85-92. 3 Fairchild, M.D., and Sturman, M.B., 1974. Unilateral sensory motor rhythm, SMR, training in cats, a basis for testing neurophysiological and behavioral effects of monomethylhydrazine, MMH. Report to the Aerospace Medical Research Laboratory, AMRLTR 73-123. 4 Hoffman, D.A., Stockdale, S., Hicks, L.L., and Schwaniger, J.E., 1995. Diagnosis and Treatment of Head Injury. Journal of Neurotherapy, Sum, V1, N 114-21, EEG Spectrum. 5 Hollowbrow, P.L., and Berry, P.S., 1986. Hyperactivity and Learning Disabilities. Journal of Learning Disabilities, 23, 426-430. 6 Howard, M.E., submitted 1993. Mild brain injury, causes, damages, diagnosis, and treatment. In damages in tort actions. Matthew Bender and Sons. 7 Howe, R.C., and Sturman, M.B., 1972. Cortical-subcortical EEG correlates of suppressed motor behavior during sleep and waking in the cat. Journal of Electroencephalography and Clinical Neurophysiology, 2, 681-695. 9 Linden, M., Habib, T., and Radojevic, V., 1993. A controlled study of the effects of EEG biofeedback on the cognition and behavior of children with attention deficit disorders and learning disabilities. Manuscript submitted for publication 10. Luber, J.F., and Baller, W.W., 1976a. Behavioral Management of Epileptic Seizures Following Biofeedback Training of the Sensoromotor Rhythm. Biofeedback and Self-Regulation, 1, 77-104. 11 Luber, J.F., and Schaus, M.N., 1976b. EEG Behavioral Changes in a Hyperactive Child Concurrent Training of the Sensoromotor Rhythm, SMR. A Preliminary Report. Biofeedback and Self-Regulation, 9, 1, 1-23. 12 Luber, J.O., and Luber, J.F., 1984. Electroencephalographic Biofeedback of SMR and Beta Treatment of Attention Deficit Disorders in a Clinical Setting. Biofeedback and Self-Regulation, 9, 1, 1-23. 13 Luber, J.O., Bianchini, K., Calhoun, W., Lambert, E., Brody, Z., and Shavson, H., 1985. Spectral Analysis of EEG Differences Between Children with and Without Learning Disabilities. Journal of Learning Disabilities, 18, 403-408. 14 Luber, J.F., 1991. Discourse on the Development of EEG Diagnostics and Biofeedback for Attention Deficit/Hyperactivity Disorders. Biofeedback and Self-Regulation, 16, 202-225. 15 National Institute of Mental Health, 1993. Overview of Learning Disabilities. NIH Publication No. 933611, National Institute of Mental Health. 16 Othmer, S.F., and Othmer, S., 1989. EEG Biofeedback Training for Hyperactivity, Attention Deficit Disorder, Specific Learning Disabilities, and Other Disorders, EEG Spectrum. 17 Othmer, S.F., and Othmer, S., 1992a. EEG Biofeedback for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, EEG Spectrum. 18 Othmer, S.F., and Othmer, S., 1992b. Evaluation and Remediation of Attentional Deficits, EEG Spectrum. 19 Othmer, S.F., and Othmer, S., 1994. EEG Biofeedback, Medicine, Therapy, or Learning. EEG Spectrum Incorporated 20. Othmer, S., Kaiser, D., and Othmer, S.F., 1995. EEG Biofeedback Training for Attention Deficit Disorder, a review of recent controlled studies and clinical findings, EEG Spectrum. 21 Othmer, S., 1999. Working with the Unreachable Child, Physiological Perspective, and a Proposed Approach. EEG Spectrum. 22 Robbins, J., 1996. Wired for Miracles. Association for Applied Psychophysiology and Biofeedback. 23 Robbins, J., 1997, November 11. Biofeedback offers help to hyperactive children. New York Times, Science Section. 24 Sturman, M.B., and Fryer, L., 1972. Suppression of Seizures in an Epileptic Following Sensoromotor EEG Feedback Training. Journal of Electroencephalography and Clinical Neurophysiology, 33, 89-95. 25 Sturman, M.B., McDonald, L.R., and Stone, R.K., 1974. Biofeedback training of the sensoromotor EEG rhythm in man, effect on epilepsy. Epilepsia, 15, 395 to 416. 26 Sturman, M.B., 1977. Sensoromotor EEG operant conditioning and experimental and in clinical effects, Pavlovian Journal Biological Science, 12, 2, 65 to 92. 27 Sturman, M.B., 1980. EEG biofeedback in the treatment of epilepsy, an overview circa 1980. White, L. and Tursky, B., eds, Clinical Biofeedback, Efficacy and Mechanisms, The Guilford Press, New York. 28 Tanzi, M., and Brunner, R., 1983. EMG and EEG biofeedback training in the treatment of a 10-year-old hyperactive boy with a developmental reading disorder. Biofeedback and self-regulation, 4, 299 to 311. 29 Tanzi, M., 1985. Brainwave signatures, an index reflexive of the brain's functional neuroanatomy, further findings on the effect of EEG sensoromotor rhythm biofeedback training on the neurological precursors of learning disabilities. International Journal of Psychophysiology, 3, 85 to 99. What our clients are saying about neurofeedback: our son clearly benefited after every session of NF. The benefits he gained are areas which cannot be taught. It's like it has to come from within him. His awareness of events and surroundings are much better, and he even helped me on his own accord by carrying a bag of groceries. Normally he would have ignored what I was doing and walked away. He is much more together and connected with us. Mother of 5-year-old with autism: as we near our yearly celebration of things for which we are thankful, I am mindful of your organization and the many instances of dramatic healing that are occurring through neurofeedback around the world, due in large part to your efforts. Blessings to you and that which you seek to accomplish. Neurofeedback client who is home training in the fall of 2009. Our 14-year-old son began having migraine headaches. He would have 1 to 2 per week, accompanied by vomiting and followed by 24 hours of sleep. Between the last week of October and the 19th of December, he missed 17 days of school. On January 4, 2010, he had his first appointment with Roxana at the EEG Institute. He has had a weekly session since that time and has not experienced a single migraine since he began the therapy. It is an incredible relief to have found a way to help our child when he was in such debilitating pain. The healing that my son has experienced is nothing short of a miracle. We cannot recommend the EEG Institute highly enough. Parents of child who suffered with migraines, we believe very strongly in treating our daughter's autism developmentally, in looking at the source of her constrictions and challenges from the inside out. We chose neurofeedback because it addresses the issues that cause the symptoms/behaviors, versus band-aid therapies, treatments, or drugs. After her first neurofeedback session, she, for the first time in her 5 years of life, slept soundly through the night. We all did. She is now 7.5 and has slept soundly and deeply ever since, allowing her to feel and be the best she can be and receive the best results possible in life and in her other areas of therapy. That was only one of many positive results that we experienced as a result of neurofeedback. We will be forever grateful to Sue and her team at EEG Institute. Mother of autistic child: about 8 months ago, my son's behavior changed dramatically. He started having moderately severe tics and trouble in school concentrating and following directions. He then was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. Needless to say, my husband and I were devastated. We immediately started searching the web and looking for ways to help my son that didn't involve medication. That is how we found neurofeedback, and more importantly, Mrs. Othmer at the EEG Institute. My son has had about 20 sessions, and the change in him is nothing short of a miracle. His tics have calmed down to where we barely notice them, and his teacher is reporting that he is able to focus better and stay on task now. He also is less volatile, and just generally a happier child. Thank you Mrs. Othmer and the dedicated staff at EEG Institute, for giving me my son back, and giving my son the tools and ability to live a happy, healthy life. Mother of child with Tourette syndrome. I'm a Vietnam vet who had a violently physically abusive dad. For most of my adult life I dealt with it by drinking a fifth or two a day. Needless to say, I was a very angry human being. I was angry about the war and unconsciously angry about my childhood. Within 4 or 5 neurofeedback sessions, I began experiencing a dramatic change. I started becoming more mentally stable and I started coming out of my shell. I stopped drinking. Completely. I noticed I wasn't angry on the job anymore. Actually, my workers noticed it first. Then I noticed that things that used to make me explode no longer existed. Tomorrow I'm on my 40th session and my life has changed completely. In 6 months, I've shed 40 years of anger, anguish, and pain. For the first time in my life, my entire life, at age 60, I am a genuinely happy human being. My friends and family have noticed a major difference, and because I finally became my true self, I finally found true love and happiness. I can honestly say that I am a whole human being, and I will be forever grateful to Sue and Siegfried Othmer and Roxana Socio for making this possible. If not for the EEG Institute's generous program for veterans, I would never have reached this point. Vietnam veteran for most of my life, I was a rageaholic. Of course, I didn't realize it. But along the way, I've destroyed a lot of telephones and a lot of computers. Smashed them all to bits. Tiny bits. I'm female, by the way, in case you think only guys get this enraged. I was desperately lonely and unhappy. There was no joy in my life. No amount of psychotherapy, drugs, meditation, hypnotherapy, psychic healings, great love life, or vacations in Maui could lighten the bruising black pain of my spirit. Now, things that used to incite me to a killing rage just roll right off my back. My friends have been blown away by the changes in me. Even my boss has noticed it. He says I've become totally mellow. For the first time since early childhood I actually have serenity in my daily life. Finally, at age 55, I'm actually happy. And what I love about it is, this is for keeps. My brain has changed the way it processes things. Instead of luffing, shaking like a sail set too close to the wind, my neurons sail serenely, plump and full, down gentler, kinder pathways. For the first time that I can remember, I am experiencing a sense of grace and equanimity in my life. Client with previous rage control issues, we're definitely doing something right. Our 6-year-old son has become very polite, courteous, and agreeable. He is concerned about others' feelings and whether he is being good. He is showing more initiative to do things that he has been asked to do. He has drawn more pictures in the last 3 weeks than in 3 years. Mother of Asperger's child who is now home training with neurofeedback. My adopted son has improved his ability to focus in school, best grades ever, his athletic ability, best tennis rating ever, and has eliminated all medications. Most importantly, his behavioral outbursts are gone. He has a new sense of calm attentiveness, and increasing self-esteem. All these changes have helped him bond and develop meaningful relationships. He is a joy to be around. I thank the EEG Institute for their help and commitment. Mother of teenager with reactive attachment disorder. The change in my daughter is remarkable. While doing homework she is focused, she is able to comprehend without going to blank out and frustration, she is solving problems and feeling good about it. She is not panicking and falling apart over her present heavy course load. And she is now rarely irritable, a very pleasant change. Mother of college student with anxiety and depression. Our son underwent a remarkable transformation following our visit to your clinic. He was an extremely difficult child, and he now sleeps through the night. He is no longer constipated, he listens, he is extremely connected, and he smiles and relishes life. Father of child with seizures, behavior, and learning problems. Our son was just chosen to be one of 5 first graders out of 120 to receive an award at his elementary school for success in academic and social arenas, as well as enthusiasm, cooperation, participation, and respect for others. Last year, this would have seemed as far away as the moon, and it is still hard to believe the amazing progress that has been possible in such a very short time. Thank you. You have made the life he was supposed to have possible. Mother of high-functioning autistic child, thank you for my new life. I can now sleep with no nightmares or night sweats, and I'm eating well. I feel very good most of the time. War veteran with PTSD for 10 years, my son is doing awesome. We are thrilled. Now that summer is here, I hope to train him every day. He finished school on a great note. He is becoming more independent there and needing his aides less. The biggest change is in his verbal skills. Wow! Is all I can say. Mother of autistic child, my grandson is doing better in general and concentration is definitely improving, too. All in all positive. Thank you, thank you. Grandmother of an ADHD teenager, I had no moments yesterday. Neurofeedback is working for me. I am so happy to be doing this. Asperger's adult, everything in my life has been in so much disarray, but neurofeedback has kept it all good. Add adult, a whole night's sleep. Less irritability and impulsivity and improved attention, just some of the permanent improvements that my daughters experienced with neurofeedback. As a mom and an occupational therapist, I believe that neurofeedback training will revolutionize how we treat children with ADHD. Mother of child with ADHD, after neurofeedback training, I am finally pain-free and able to live my life without the fear of being paralyzed by a migraine headache. Former migraine sufferer reports from clinicians. A case vignette reported by a neurofeedback practitioner in Germany. A 6-year-old boy came in with extreme night sweats, nocturnal teeth grinding, and very poor attention. All these issues vanished over just a few training sessions. Another child came into the same office shortly thereafter with very similar symptoms, but in this case also had extreme difficulty in social relationships. At age 8, he had no friends, and no one would play with him. This boy trained very differently from the first, but he started being different with people after just the first session. His older brother is now playing with him routinely. The boy is now taking the initiative in making friendships. Brian Othmer Foundation EEG Institute Training Courses Newsletter Products Link to us, Contact us, Careers, Tech Support. The unique and mysterious brain. Each human brain is unique in the way it processes information. This uniqueness accounts for the vast differences in ideas, beliefs, and behaviors between individuals. Appreciating what makes each of us unique and understanding what makes one person's behavior normal and another's abnormal is part of the study of the human brain. Until recently, the brain's exact function in matters of abnormal behavior was obscure, but now scientists can isolate, identify, and pinpoint the location of those brain waves responsible for various behaviors. By conducting a recording of an individual's electrical brain waves, and through the use of specialized computer equipment and software, brainwave patterns can be identified, quantified, and displayed in a diagnostic tool called a brain map. Obtaining brain map information. The first step in brain mapping is conducting an electroencephalogram or EEG. An EEG measures fluctuating electrical activity in the brain's hemispheres. The procedure is completely non-invasive and does not cause any pain. Brainwave activity is relayed from electrodes placed at strategic points on the scalp, see electrode location map at left, to a computer where the data is recorded and stored. This raw data is then compared and charted within a specialized normative database, and then converted into a map of the brain that can be easily printed and analyzed by experts in the field of brain mapping and neurofeedback, discovering and establishing what is normal. Although a brain map is as unique as each individual, patterns of normal and abnormal emerge when compared within an extensive brain map database, just as an individual is considered relatively normal or abnormal when compared against other individuals in a societal grouping. Researchers have studied thousands of brain maps of individuals who do not possess any neurological conditions considered as abnormal. From these studies, benchmarks for normal range brain function are established for various age categories and gender. The NX-Link Brain Map Database. The NX-Link Brain Map Database, utilized by New Brain, employs a color-based standard deviation model to identify abnormal brainwave patterns. On the NX-Link standard deviation scale shown at right, normal corresponds to 0.0 and is shown by the color black. As you deviate by degrees away from the norm, problematic brainwave patterns increase. The blue side of the scale indicates brain waves that are lower in amplitude compared to normal waves. This means the brain is under-functioning, the brain waves are not up to par to do their jobs and are too small to be effective. The further down on the scale, the lower the amplitude of the brain waves and the greater the problems within the brain. The red side, anything in this range is over-functioning, the brain waves are too large in amplitude. Areas of the brain with these colors are considered as hotspots, especially the higher up the chart to white. These areas of the brain are like a car with the gas pedal stuck on, and the car is racing out of control. So too may the brain be stuck in on with the pedal to the metal, the brain is racing and driving beyond its means of being in control. As this happens, the brain is not functioning effectively, and inappropriate behavior is the result. Deviation from normal. Understanding standard deviation is important, as standard deviations help to show the severity of problems occurring within the brain. Consider the bell curves at right in conjunction with the standard deviation scale shown on the preceding page. Beneath the apex of the bell curve lies the average or normal range of behavior. Brain waves here are considered to be a normal height. 70% of all people typically fall within this range. As you move toward the outer fringes of the curve, the averages change, and the brain waves become increasingly either too large or too small to be effective. For example, when the color burgundy/red shows up on the brain map, the condition is one standard deviation away from normal. But if the brain map shows an orange color, the condition is 2 standard deviations away from normal and is much more severe. If the color shown is in the yellow/white range, then the condition is 3 standard deviations away from normal, and the problem in this area is considered extremely severe. A brain map identifies the path to improvement. Changing and improving one's life is important, and the brain map identifies the most effective path to take to accomplish this. As each brain map is unique from all other brain maps, so too is the course of action and treatment toward the final destination of improving the identified neurological concerns. Sample brain maps and their explanations. Map 1. In the first brain map example shown below, we see that the brain waves in most regions of the brain fall in the blue range, indicating underactivity. The exception is the theta wave in the front part of the brain, which appears in the burgundy/red range. The amplitude of the large, slow theta wave is too high in this region, it's over-functioning here. Immediately we can determine that this abnormality involves an attention deficit disorder, ADD, behavior, such as difficulty paying attention. How we know this is because the abnormality of too high a theta wave in the frontal lobe and central regions of the brain is an ADD pattern. If the same pattern had shown in orange, the problem would be more severe. Attention deficit disorder has 12 subtypes, including difficulty paying attention, impulsivity, hyperactivity, and distractibility, to name a few. ADD is a broad diagnosis, but brain maps help to determine the exact subtype, S, that are occurring so that the treatment is more effective. This may be why certain medications will work for one individual diagnosed with ADD, but not another, because the subtypes of ADD vary so much within the neurological functioning of the brain. Map 2. This next map shows the brain wave patterns of a 19-year-old male. Before his EEG, the client shared that he had been told all of his life that he had ADD. But when the map was processed, instead of seeing overactive colors showing up in theta in the frontal area of the brain, those indicators were absent. When reviewing the map with the client, he was asked if distractibility was the reason he was told he had ADD. He said yes, that he was easily distracted by things around him. He was also asked if he had math learning disabilities. Again he answered yes. Problems with distractions typically show up in the P4 area, note P4 on his map, and problems with math and numbers usually show up in the parietal area of the brain at P3, PZ and P4. On his map it is evident that the parietal lobe area is in red, indicating these problems. Map 3. In this map, several areas show overactivity in the brain. Theta is red in the frontal area, alpha is red in the back, and beta shows in red all over. First, consider the large theta waves in the front. These indicate problems in paying attention, and it is worst at F3, FZ, and F4. Next, take a look at alpha in the back. Alpha should be in the back as alpha is generated there, but not this much alpha. Now look at beta. Here you see beta in red, blanketing the majority of the brain area. Overfunctioning beta is responsible for a number of problems such as anxiety, nervousness, constant worry, difficulty sleeping, inability to relax, and the feeling of being wired. The person with a brain map like the one above has difficulty taking in information and processing it due to the abnormal theta wave. In this case, the information may be presented, such as a teacher talking to a student, or a parent giving instructions to a child, but overall, the result is an inability to pay attention, the homework doesn't get completed or the room properly cleaned. This individual may also appear to be in an overly relaxed state due to alpha being so high in the back, but the opposite is actually true. Inside, he or she is a nervous jitter and is internally wired due to the high beta throughout the brain. Map 4. This next map of just theta, shown at right, shows a person who may struggle with impulsivity, obsessive-compulsive, OCD, behavior and oppositional defiant, OD, behavior. These behaviors are typical with high theta in the central area at CZ. Variations may include high theta in front as well as high theta in the central area. The brain map is an important diagnostic tool. The work of brain mapping is to identify areas of the brain where brain waves are malfunctioning so that an effective and efficient process of neurofeedback can then be administered to correct the abnormalities. The brain map examples shown above were only a small piece of an actual, full-blown brain map, which is usually around 50 to 70 pages and includes a detailed report of the identified problems.